T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, guys, another week, and we're going blood pythons. Tim Bailey was nice enough to set this one up for us. Couple guys that are playing it big in the rod iron game right now. But before we get started, introduce our guest, USARC. Just like always, new year. If you haven't got your membership, get it going for the beginning of the year. Easy to remember if it's the first of the year. Second off, Super Show's coming up in 2 weeks, guys. I'm not going to be there. I'm sad. I'll be there this summer, though, I promise. So if you got time, head out, support the show, support the vendors. All right, let's get this one rolling. All right, Ernesto, thank you, buddy. Appreciate you making time for us on short notice.
No, it's the other way around, and thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
Cool. And Tim, man, I appreciate you setting this up. Honestly, I'm looking forward to this. I don't think I've had a conversation about blood pythons in the last year that hasn't revolved around rod iron in some way. So I think even if we just dabble in that tonight, it's going to be interesting. But honestly, Ernesto, I kind of do this the same way always. Tell us a little bit about your history, even if it's short. I want to know your coming ups a little bit. What got you in the hobby? Maybe somebody who showed you the way. If it's Tim, give him a pat on the back, whatever makes you happy.
No, 100%. I mean, Tim is a big part of like recent years. But I started like back in the days. I grew up in Cancun, Mexico. That's where I'm from. And that's essentially jungle, right? So I was surrounded by animals. I was surrounded by lizards and snakes pretty much all my childhood. And then, snakes in general are big in Mexico because it's part of our culture, right? You go to the pyramids, man, they're everywhere. You see snakeheads like left and right, and it's just so, it's even in our flag. If you look at the flag, it is a freaking snake fighting an eagle. So it's part of the culture. And I always had a fascination. It started actually with dinosaurs. When I was a kid, I was the dino kid. You have your car or Hot Wheel kid, and then you have the dinosaurs. I was the dinosaur kid. But ironically, I was the only one. All of my friends didn't really care about animals, didn't really care about any of that. So my outlet were actually the school teachers who happened to have, this random pet that actually walked into the house one day, like black iguanas or basilisks or boas. And that's how I got started. And then one time, when I was in elementary, we had this contest. There's a interactive zoo down in Cancun called Crococun, I'm sorry. And they said like, okay, if you draw like this cool animal and talk about conservation, whatever, you get to name a crocodile. Me in my innocence and childhood, I was like, you get to keep a crocodile if you win this thing? I'm all in, man. I'm just gonna go for it. So I put all the effort, drawing the best thing I could. I did actually win the thing, just to realize that I did not get to keep the crocodile. I could just name it. So I was so disappointed. And I think that was like a breaking moment for me, in the sense that, man, I need to keep a reptile. That was like a personal challenge at that point. And from there on, it's just like going out, catching lizards, catching boas, catching, not venomous stuff, because obviously I couldn't keep venomous stuff, but you get to see them around quite often, coral snakes, neotropical rattlesnakes. So that's how it all started. And then as I was growing up, I thought about becoming a veterinarian, which never ended happening. I went into the medical field instead of, human medical field. And here we are today. Just growing a collection. We'll jump into that later.
Okay. What year did you make your first purchase, and did you start with blood pythons?
Not at all. Okay, so this is interesting because when I was growing up, Mexico didn't really have a lot of exotic pet trade. The only exotics you could get was essentially what you could caught in the wild. We didn't have like a pet trade established. So my first snake that I would say I bought was a boa constrictor, well, a boa imperator now. Um, I bought it on Mother's Day, so I tricked my mom into thinking that it was a gift for her. So she took me to the store. I bought the animal. She didn't know about it, and then when we made it home, I showed her the snake, and she flipped out. And she almost, kicked me out of the house. And I think this was when I was 12, 13 years old, and I kept that boa until I went to college. So that was the first animal I bought.
Oh, very cool. But what year when did you start getting into bloods?
So blood pythons came very late because again, I didn't have an option to acquire pythons. It was just boas or colurids that were native to Mexico and especially in that area. But my parents, it's funny, I have it ready here 'cause I knew it was going to come. My parents got me a nice book, and a lot of you have seen this book before. It's like, boas and pythons and reptiles and amphibians. But they have the most unrealistic picture of a blood python, like this one right here. I think this is one of those like Karen Norris's dreams to hatch one day.
Yeah.
Even after many, many generations, we're not at that point. But it's just a drawing, right? So when I saw that snake, I immediately got like hooked. It's like at some point in my life, I want to get a blood python. And that didn't happen until I was, what, 18, 19 years old. And that's when the real pet trade in Mexico started to, get traction, and they were starting to import animals from the US. And the snake that I got originally was from Nerd. Nerd was one of the few that were actually sending animals to Mexico through just one importer. And it's funny because when I got that snake, I was very excited. I opened the box. Now I have never seen a blood python, right? Except for the picture that you just saw in the book. So I opened the box and I pulled this animal. It's like, what the hell is this? This is brown. I ordered a blood python. This is just brown. I hate this thing. This is not what I ordered. So I went into this rabbit hole. It's like, okay, I need to do research. Let's go back in, like to the internet and start doing research. And then obviously you start learning. Um, blood pythons don't hatch out red, and most of them might never become red. It's just a line bred that you have to do in multiple generations, and that's when I discovered the BPI website, and then bloodpythons.com, which is Karen Norris. And then I essentially started to have interactions with them via email because social media wasn't even a thing back then. This is what 2000, no, yeah, 2006, 2005, give or take. And that's when I sent my first email to Tracy in hopes that I could import a blood python. Because she, on the website, she got pictures of different morphs. And obviously, when I learned about morphs, my mind just exploded. It just went ballistic. And like, this is it. This is what I want to do when I grow up, right? And well, back then, a pair of Matrix Het T positive albinos were running for about $5,000. I wasn't working. I didn't have, the money or the means to import any of that. So that kind of shut down my dream right there. And then many years later, I was able to move to the US with my wife. And the first thing I did is like, okay, now we have an apartment. We're a little somewhat stable. Let's go buy snakes. Stupidest thing ever, right? Because you just moved into a country, you don't know what you're doing, but it's always been a part of me. So I cannot live without an animal or a reptile per se. So I went and got a T plus albino blood python that I couldn't keep very long because shortly after my wife told me, it's like, hey, we're pregnant, and so we need to readjust everything. So there goes the blood python again. So it was like a back and forth type of deal with blood pythons until finally just a couple, well, no, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I decided that I wanted to do it seriously.
Yeah, well, good on you, man. I'll be honest, same as you around that time. I used to obsess over the VPI website. I would always look at the gallery 1, gallery 2, gallery 3 of blood pythons.
Yeah.
Always checking the bragging posts, always checking her diaries. I wasn't even buying blood pythons, but I just remember obsessing over everything. And think about anything you ever saw on Tracy's site is I feel like to this day there's still animals I saw in there that still are not even readily available in the hobby.
That's right.
You know, things that have just come on later on. But no, I love that. And, you know, the coming back in and coming back out. You know, your collection never got too big where you had to like do like a big rebuild. But
Mhm.
I've had a couple times too, just because of things in life that were out of my control. I've always enjoyed my rebuild, and when I actually committed to it, I feel like I did it right.
Yeah, there you go. And I also, you know, I get excited and I just start talking, but I forgot a big part of my history with blood pythons is that I actually, after I got that first blood python in Mexico, I contact the same guy and he's like, "Hey, can you import morphs?" And he's like, "Yeah, but they cost a leg and an arm. You know, it's like these are brand new stuff, and if you're the only one who wants to work with them. We need to build a big, you know, shipping, whatever." So I was fortunate enough to be the first one to bring into Mexico the first teen egg albino and first ivory and a T plus matrix. Um, that unfortunately I ended up losing to a terrible guy in Mexico that essentially stole my collection when I moved to the U.S. So that was also part of it. Like, the obsession grew. It's like, man, it's like you try and you lose it, and you try and you lose it until this day. You know, it's like now here we are. I'm like, I'm not letting go.
Yeah. Again, you know, this hobby, you know, partnerships are always tough. I've been on the wrong side where I've done the wrong thing, not to the extent of stealing anything, but you know, mistakes happen on both sides, and it's easier when it just falls on you. But I get all that. But how about you and Tim? Like, where'd you guys start meeting up at?
So it was the NARDC at Arlington in September 20. No, it was February actually, because I remember our first interaction clearly. You had the deep albino batik wrought iron on your table.
Yeah.
And I came to you and I asked, he's like, "Hey man, when are you releasing wrought irons?" And you're like, "Well, I have to make them." And I remember asking you, "Okay, you just know how much are they going to go for?" And you just gave me like the look, like you're not going to buy it, so I'm just going to tell you whatever number. And you're like 10K if I even make them. And I was like, "Oh crap, I don't have that money right now." But then later that same year in September, the September show, I came back to the table and Tim had the female wrought iron that I acquired originally, and that's when it all started because we talked for hours and hours about the wrought iron project. You know how him and Tracy had that issue with the scale, the post-ocular scales, and when I acquired that animal, Tim was very straightforward about it. Like, "Look, man, this one has that scale issue. So far, it's cosmetic. If you want to take on it, go for it." And that's essentially when Tim and I became, you know, like,
Yeah,
you want to
yeah. The ocular, like you were saying, it's funny because Tim, I think I mentioned this last time we talked, but you know, when I saw the one on your table at Daytona, that was the first time I think I'd ever seen one in person. I can pretty much guarantee it. And you saw me like down there zooming in with my camera, and I was like focusing on the face because I thought the eyes were beautiful. Like I love the eyes on the animal, and I think you immediately asked me if I was checking the eyes. You know, I thought I haven't really seen a bad degree of that yet. I did look around a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it's terribly bad. Has anybody done rod iron to rod iron yet?
Tim did.
Yes. Me.
Hey, and did you guys? I can't remember. Did you say there was a super type form in there or nothing?
Yes. No, there was four homozygous animals in there. And we did a big write up. It should be on Tracy's website about the super animals and the super clutch. What's funny is the super clutch was the clutch that for the first time I actually saw more than what Tracy had reported to me the first time she saw the post-ocular scales, which would in general be 1 to 3 scales, almost always on the left eye, and generally very small. Tracy would tell you 1 or 2 millimeters. When I had the super clutch and I was talking to Tracy about it, just over the phone, the easiest way for me to describe the scale coverage on the eye was by percentage of coverage, which will tell you that this wasn't just a little tiny scale in the back. I actually had an animal with as much as 90% coverage of the eye with a scale. So that particular clutch produced a lot of stuff we hadn't seen yet, which was major scale issue. So you got major scale issue there. The secondary piece to that was there was 4 supers in the clutch. One of them, I don't remember now, it either died coming out of the egg or right after it came out of the egg. Then there was 3 that survived. 2 of them died pretty quickly. And the last one I actually brought to Tinley to the show. It hadn't eaten a meal yet. And I had a feeling, hey, if this thing doesn't make it, at least I want to bring it out where people could see it. So I did bring it to Tinley. It seemingly did okay in Tinley. Seemingly did okay on the way home, and died on the way home. So I mean, it was fine when I stopped on the way home Sunday evening. Monday when I got home, it was dead, which could have been stress. Who knows? But still not really sure what happened with the supers. The animal that Ernesto got was from that clutch. It was a heterozygous animal from that clutch, and I had a local customer that also bought one. So the one my local customer bought was perfect, no eye issues whatsoever with that wrought iron. The one Ernesto bought had minor eye issue there, and then in that clutch was also an albino wrought iron that I had kept. And then there was, maybe one normal and then one other wrought iron in there. So fast forward to today, there's one animal that survives from that entire clutch. So Ernesto's female ended up passing. His was the first. When he called me about it and started telling me about some, heart enlargement, some fluid in the head and under the jaw. And after he told me that, I went and looked at my albino animal, and within a couple of weeks of him telling me that, I started seeing the swelling in the face. And then had a vet buddy of mine come over and look, and he brought an ultrasound over. We ultrasounded all the animals. Sure enough, we could see problems with the heart in that one before it occurred, but shortly thereafter, after the facial swelling starts, is when the heart enlargement starts. And at this point, I don't think that's really it's not a time-based issue. It's a size issue. So depending on how you feed that animal, when it reaches a certain size is when you start putting enough stress on the heart that the heart will start enlarging. And that fluid that ends up coming in the facial area is actually fluid backup from the heart that pushes its way up into the face, generally in the lower jaw when it swells all underneath the lower jaw. So my T positive albino ended up dying. And then I talked to my local customer that bought one. His animal ended up dying. So the only animal that's surviving from that entire clutch is a wrought iron male, which happens to be the animal that had 90% coverage scale in the left eye. And what's interesting about that one is my vet buddy was actually over at my house at the time, shortly after that clutch hatched, and he was doing some surgery on one of my boas, looking at some which ended up being cancer all over in her nose and her face and everywhere. But he was already over here at the house and had a bunch of utensils and tools and instruments out, and everything was clean. He goes, "Hey man," he said, just out of curiosity, he said, do you want to cut that scale off of that eye just for science, just to see what happens, see if that thing grows back, see how it interacts, see what happens. I said, "Hey man, go ahead." I said, "Let's grab this one. It's got the biggest piece. It's 90% coverage. Let's cut that scale off." So the interesting thing there is, and I didn't look as close, and most of those animals are gone now, so it's hard to tell. But from what I can remember, anything that had less than, I'd say 50%, 40 or 30% coverage, scale coverage and less, that scale kind of floats on the eye. When we cut the one with 90%, lo and behold, the scale was attached to the retina. So we actually damaged the retina when we cut the scale and pulled that scale off. I thought that retina would grow back and, wouldn't have any problems. And it mostly did, but there's some retinal damage on that animal still. You can see it. He acts fine. He's actually at this point probably twice the size of all the other animals that died. My buddy did ultrasound him after Ernesto's passed, and we looked at him, and he said, "Hey, I can't see anything with the heart on that one." And then the only other animal that I had produced at the time was the albino wrought iron batik. He ultrasounded that one. That was from a previous clutch, not from the super breeding. And that one didn't have any heart related issues. So that animal I still have no heart related issues. And then that last one from the super clutch, and he's seemingly doing fine. I have no intention really of breeding him or doing anything with him other than just keeping him, because I just won't sell him at this point in time. But so, a lot of discussions went back and forth with me and Tracy on that. Is, the crazy thing is, so to back up historically a little bit more for anyone that's really paying attention to the history of that, the first animal I got from Tracy was a wrought iron female, and that's what we deemed a perfect animal. She's got no scale issues whatsoever on her eyes. Matter of fact, Tracy had not produced any animals with a scale issue when I got that female. She had produced some when I got my male, but my male is a perfect eye animal. He has no issues. However, I will say that my male and my female are 3 years apart, but they have the exact same parents. So they are siblings, but not year siblings, just siblings in the form of same parents. Both of my animals are Het T positive, because Tracy was breeding the original wrought iron to a T positive albino, so everything she was making was Het. So when we had the issue with the supers, the question came in, is the albino aspect contributing to that problem? Is the relation of the animals contributing to that problem? Was it potentially incubation issue? So there were so many questions that were still unanswered, which we still don't really have a lot of answers there. I think at this point, after a lot of conversation and trials on Ernesto's part, conversation with Tracy, and Ernesto hatched the first clutch that had some perfect animals. And then I replicated last year what he did incubation wise and had the same success as him. He did it again that year as well last year. So we think we have the eye thing solved, and Ernesto produced an albino wrought iron that doesn't have any scale issues. So I think we kind of have ruled out that the albinism is the problem. It doesn't rule out the fact that my animals were siblings. So I still have not yet repeated any super breedings, because I want to get some type of outcrossing before I do. You're only going to get so much outcrossing with everything having a direct relation to the original animal Tracy had, but I want to do it as best I can. So to lead to one of the breedings I'm doing this year, I'm actually breeding a martyr line male to my original wrought iron female, which A, let's see if we can add some red into the wrought iron, but B, let me get something that I know is wild type and normal as possible into there to try to breed strength into the project. And that's probably the thing I can get furthest away from that. And then potentially, I haven't even brought it up to Ernesto when I was talking to somebody the other day, is possibly even next year trading a wrought iron from my production to one from Ernesto's production, just to try to get some outcrossing. And so use some male from that either trade or from that martyr production to breed back into the wrought iron stuff before I try supers again. So we'll see how that goes. But for now, I don't want to try it again. So we still have some answers on the super front. I don't want to rule it out as something that cannot be done based on one breeding. But I definitely have a few suspicions and want to get a little bit more strength to the project before I try again. The only other breeding I'm doing this year that's not per se related to that discussion, but just because I want to see it, the original albino wrought iron batik did have probably about 30% scale coverage on that particular animal. And that was the first wrought iron I produced. So he's 3 or 4 years old now. I don't remember. I have to go look. But I've never bred him. But now that we've figured out what we have figured out, and we've got some interest back in the project, because the first year or 2 years that I produced stuff, a lot of people got scared of it, which, I understood. I didn't agree with it necessarily, but I understood it. But now that we put all that information out there, and I think part of the being as open as we were about transparent on what was going on has probably helped on reinvigorating everyone coming back to it. You know, now that we think we figured a little bit out. But at any rate, there's one piece I still know we haven't figured out is what I want to know now. And personally, to date, probably my favorite animal that's been produced so far. And I told Ernesto he's got something coming because my albino wrought iron didn't die till she was a year old. So the color changes he's going to see in his, he's going to be amazed by it. It's probably my favorite animal to date. So with that said, I took my albino wrought iron petite this year, male, and put him to a really nice T positive female. So hopefully I'll make some more albino wrought irons this year because I really like that mutation so far. But what I also want to try to prove from that clutch is incubating the way Ernesto figured out last year or 2 years ago, and doing that with this clutch is find out, can I produce perfect eyed animals from a animal that had eye scale issues? Because we have not done any breeding of an animal that had eye scale issues to date. So we don't know, you know, we know now we can take perfect animals and recreate perfect animals with, we think, consistency. Can we go the other way? Can I make perfect animal with one that has an eye scale issue? So that's twofold in that breeding, is to make some more really awesome albino wrought irons because they're my favorites. And secondarily, you know, can we take an animal that's got an eye scale issue and produce perfect animals? Which, if we can, is nice to know. We keep people from being scared from buying those. However, if we've got it figured out, we may never have to worry about that again anyway, and just don't make any. We don't have to worry about it. But it's still a piece of knowledge that I think would be good to have out there from a transparency perspective. And for at some point in time in the future, somebody is probably going to get a hold of a wrought iron 10 years from now, breed that, and maybe have some issues because it's been so far removed from where we are now. They incubate a little bit hotter and start having issues again. So it's still worthwhile information, I think, to have out there. But that was probably a long-winded answer to has a super been made yet? And the short answer was yes.
Yeah. Well, first off, you know, man, and I'm sure I said this anytime we've talked about it, but you know, it's always unique how different communities manage projects. You know, I made the joke about how when your guys' community made a scaleless, you kicked it to the curb. You said, no, we're not going to want this. It doesn't make sense. It's over. And with this one, you know, you breeding martyr into it is the opposite of what most people do in a lot of communities, because when they have so much invested in a project, usually the goal is, what's the most expensive other animal I have to put into it? I want to see how far I can take the project. I like with you guys knowing that you're like doing the groundwork in this, you're actually putting the work in.
Oh yeah. I think the long-term health of the project benefits from doing that. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
And
That's the right thing to do.
Not to mention, well, it is, and I still think we're still getting a benefit from that. I mean, there's some red that I think we can tweak even further in there. I mean, there's still so much to be done with it. Who knows? You got to try everything anyway. But why not try to add some strength in it at the same time? So that was my thought process on it, at least.
yeah, and I remember when we first started talking about the wrought iron project, when I acquired the original animal, that was it, right? At that point, the theory of the T positive albino affecting the scale issue was big. So the original plan when I acquired that animal was actually to bred it out from, you know, the wrought iron. So we were going to reverse engineer that and bring the normal without any kind of head albino into the mix.
Yep,
So that we can further down, you know, get rid of the T positive albino gene completely. Little did I know the female that I was going to use, or did I use, was 100% head albino. That I didn't know at the time. That's why I used that female. It was not intentional. It actually was an accident.
Yeah.
And it was a happy accident, right? It was like, oh, great. Because the first like 2 wrought irons that hatched were like normal looking wrought irons, perfect, beautiful eyes. And then the last egg is always the last egg, right? It's the one that took forever to hatch, like 24 hours after the first 5 caught the egg. This little like nose was crazy red. I thought it's like, because the female, it's a lily. It's a lily line animal.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, that's interesting. That you know, a redhead is not redhead, and definitely the wrought iron is not redhead. And then I pay attention. It's like, holy you know, like it's a deep positive albino rotter. I freaked out because it was not in the plans, and I'm like, oh my god, Tracy's gonna kill me, bro. This is not supposed to happen. I'm dead. Like that's the first thing I thought. I was not. I wasn't even excited. I was freaking out. Like shit, I fucked up, literally.
And I don't remember, was there a normal T positive in the clutch? That was the only homozygous T positive, huh?
That was the only
That's
homozygous
what I
T
thought.
positive, and it was the wrought iron.
Yeah.
So that was crazy. The first thing I did was look at the eyes. Oh, it's perfect eyes. And then I rushed and look at the other wrought iron. It's like, okay, these are also perfect eyes. So it's not that the, or at least, you know, it's a very small sample size, but it's, at least it's suggesting that the T plus albino gene is not really interfering that much. So probably something else. And as Tim was saying, it's like, okay, well, let's focus on the incubation stuff. Probably that's the thing. So the next year that we went ahead and produced more wrought irons, we were going to simulate the same conditions, which is temps a little cooler, more space between eggs. You know, the incubation boxes are a little bigger, so we don't have a lot of eggs inside those boxes. So it was a lot of parameters that we kind of tweak and try to achieve this success. And then the next step was logical step was to go into morphs, right? It's like, okay, we can produce accidentally wrought irons that are perfect, and including the T plus albino that is perfect. What about morphs? Is this a stable morph? Is this something that can be created without any issues? How are other genes going to interact? And that's what we did last year with the 007 to wrought iron. And that was very intentional because I knew that one was 100% het T plus. So I'm like, F it, let's go. Let's see what happens. And it was a massive success.
Well, and you know, your guys' sample size is so small at this stage of the project that, you know, you can make assumptions, but, you know, you really can't say for sure what's going on with that until more time's put in. You know, I was recently talking about like the early days and you being a BOA guy, the Scoria project, which you guys both know. And, you know, in the early days, the few guys that were working with it, the ones that were very wobbly, they weren't breeding. And the ones that were good, they were breeding. Now, I'm not sure that project ever truly got past the wobble, and I think there's more to that than we'll ever realize. But there was a little effort put in the beginning. Like I said, in a few generations, you know, worst case scenario, there'd be another gene that maybe interacts in a way that could make that even worse on the animal, and then you stay away from that direction. But, you know, like I said, it sounds like you guys are handling it right in the moment.
Right. And just to advance furthermore, the third, because I, you know, when I talked to Tracy, I said, this is my proposal. We're gonna do like the first pairing to a normal, second pairing is gonna be to a morph, and the third one is gonna be wrought iron to wrought iron, and that's what we're doing this year. I think I mentioned that to you, Tim, on our last conversation that I was going to go for it this year, even though it's pretty much the same genetics as these animals. They're siblings, right? My animals here, the adults that I have, are siblings to Tim's animals. So if we get similar results, then that's going to be a good indication that probably super wrought irons, or at least, you know, if they're like to an extent too much inbreeding going on, that could be very problematic. We can just walk away from supers and still use the heterozygous form to create amazing animals.
Mm-hmm. And again, you know, coming back to a thing later, and, you know, boas have a lot of trouble in the super form and a lot of crosses. And in the early days, I remember there was some, they said it was a dead end project. I think the Roswell Laddertail was one of them. Now, years later, I am seeing supers in that project. They're viable, they're breeding. And there are some supers like with Aztec we stayed away from. But yeah, like I said, worth doing because you got to figure it out. I'm sure later on, even if you have bad odds or something goes wrong this time, I'm sure in 5 years somebody's going to do it again because that's the way this hobby always works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm sure you guys, again, you're trying to strengthen it a little bit, but, you know, when you guys look at wrought iron, you're talking about like the reds, but, you know, it's also a pattern mutation. When you look at that pattern, it acted really well with the golden eye, but everything looks good with golden eye.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have gone as far as matrix golden eye wrought irons.
Tim has
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
I didn't hit that. Tim did.
Cool. How did that one look? Because I know I've seen a picture of it. Did the golden eye outshine in that combo, or was wrought iron getting its fair share?
No, they both contribute. I mean, what's funny is until and I had 2 breedings for, I bred a wrought iron to a 007 last year, and a 007 to a wrought iron last year as well. One male to female, the other female to male. Ernesto actually beat me to production last year on that. His hatched before mine. And then one of my girl 007 didn't go. So I only got 1 clutch from that. But the funny thing is, the year before is when I made the animal that we're talking about, and I thought it was a GoldenEye wrought iron. And then when Ernesto made his clutch and we got to see more of them, that's when I realized that the animal I had that was now a year old was not a GoldenEye wrought iron. It had to have matrix in it because it was so dramatically different from his. And so both genes definitely add to what that combo looks like. And I probably need to get some more pictures. What I need to do is take that animal to some shows, because I cannot get the pinks that are in that animal to show up in photos. But there are some crazy pink colorations in that animal that I know the GoldenEye is contributing to, but so is the matrix. The matrix definitely changed the pattern of that animal, and then the blacks from the wrought iron are just black, and the contrast to that animal is phenomenal. It's an amazing looking animal. I need to get another picture here pretty soon. Matter of fact, I'm probably not too far away from moving that animal up into a bigger tub. And when I do, I may try to get another picture of her. And that's a female, so we'll see how she progresses. But so far, that's been pretty phenomenal looking animal.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, Dave, because typically, as you said, GoldenEye tend to be like super powerful morph in combinations, and it loves to overtake whatever it's combined with. But I think with wrought iron, it found its match because they actually complement very well.
Yeah.
And one is not overpowering the other. It's actually a very balanced mix. And then when you add the matrix, man, it just goes crazy. It's a beautiful animal.
Yeah.
That's cool. Guys, the blood python community outside of, what are you guys playing with? Like 10 genes? Are you guys over under 10 genes right now for single gene projects? So I'm trying to think, because you guys had a few new ones recently. I always say it probably wrong, but Druid.
Yeah, it's gotta be close.
Pollen flower stuff, that's not new, but that's becoming, a little more readily available in the hobby. So those are a couple newer ones, but
I mean, just real fast, you got T-neg, you got T positive, you got Pied now, you've got wrought iron, you've got zigzag, you got slackline, you got pale gray, you got druid, you got toba, you got matrix. We're over 10. I bet you we're pushing, at frostbite, black smoke. We're probably pushing 14 or 15. I probably missed a couple in there.
okay.
Yeah, because I was looking at my website right now, and just in my collection, in my projects, I'm working with 13 different projects.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Zigzag's fascinating because, while we're talking about this wrought iron, as much as I love the color, I keep on seeing the pattern and wonder how to manipulate other stuff. You think zigzag would be too subtle for that project and wrought iron would overpower?
Possibly, but you never know till you try it. I mean, the cool thing is, and zigzags, I had zigzag stuff way back when too, before I got out and restarted. But the zigzag stuff has very red reds in them as well. So I think you may get some benefit from that red. And I still think while zigzag can be subtle, it does a lot with dorsal striping, and that's pretty dominant in that. I think there is a chance that you really throw some striping into a wrought iron for it. I don't think it's as subtle as we think, but it's possible that a wrought iron overrides it. I mean, back to what Ernesto was just saying, the way it clashes with GoldenEye, it proves that it's definitely got some dominance in its pattern. So it could dominate something that's a little weaker than a GoldenEye. But again, to me, man, I'm getting more excited to get these animals into more people's hands and see what they do, because hey, we got to see it, and everyone's going to try everything. So the next few years is going to really start getting fun with it, I think.
Well, I think it's already public, but Juggernaut is in that project. That's a public knowledge, right? I didn't just ruin that, did I?
No. He's already
I
put
thought
it
so. I
up
thought
there.
I've seen the post. I mean, I
Yeah.
knew there was a couple of people
Put it on
aware,
social
but
media, so that's out
he's
there.
another guy with just such a diverse collection. And I didn't want to, you never know with these things. Just because I know it doesn't mean other people know. But I should have known that. He's made posts. But yeah, I think he's going to be one. I mean, I know he's really excited about the project. Getting him involved is huge. I think that's going to add a lot to it, and I think he's going to probably go directions you guys might not go, which is going to be right for the project. It's really nice when you have a lot of different mindsets going in. It's tough for one person to imagine everything themselves, and a lot of other guys will treat things differently.
Right, and the direction that each one of us is taking these projects. For example, Elijah, he loves to go for like white snakes, right? And he's always looking to reduce pattern, make them brighter and whiter. And he loves T-neg albinos. I'm the opposite. I want pattern. I want dark colors. I want T plus albino. So it's each one of us have our own niches, and we want to see different things. For example, Tim is doing the pied raw diamond. That's gonna be an interesting combination, right? Because we have to see how the white interacts with the heavy pattern of the raw iron. Is that going to mess it up like it happens in ball pythons when you put like a spider to a pipe, or is it just going to explode and be a beautiful animal? We don't know. I mean, we're working different directions with the same morph, same project.
Yeah. So with, we've talked about this a little bit, but, I was having a couple of conversations recently just about pie genes in general and how they react to other genes that are leucistic type. And, it makes me think a lot about the bloods because, I don't know if it necessarily be a bad thing, but I'm sure one of these combinations with the pied is just going to make a solid white snake like you get in ball pythons now and again. Retics are the same way with some of their combinations in the pied project. So I don't know if that means like a matrix gene will get you to maybe a whiter animal because of what the ivory is being a white snake. I don't know if the druid is going to actually be, if the druid pied right off the bat is just a white snake, possibly, or a higher white animal, just because the way leucistic genes typically act within it. And I always kind of wonder with the golden eye too, because, I'd like a nice 50-50 ratio, and about every blood pied I've seen so far, I've liked. There's going to be something in it that's going to reduce it down so much that, might be appealing. If it comes down to just a head stamp on it, people might absolutely love that until they start comboing it out. And then they realize they're comboing out a spot this big. But no, like I said, and it's not going to happen fast because I know not a lot of guys are in that project, but that's going to be one that I'm looking forward to the genes you guys put in it to like throw you for a loop. That's something you don't want it to do, I guess.
For me, the only thing I'm thinking about an all white pie, a very low pattern pie in bloods. The only thing going for us in that species, at least, especially if you compare it to a ball python, is by the time like a spider pied had been made, we already had leucistic animals that were pure white. So you didn't want to recreate something that's already existed. We don't have a pure white blood python right now. So even if you make a pure white pied blood python, that's a pretty badass animal because it doesn't fucking exist. We thought it did in the super druid, and then lo and behold, Elijah will show you one when they get some age on them, they start getting dirt on them. Kind of like a super Mojave or an ivory ball. So, which is cool. I don't mind that at all because it's a pretty white animal with something you can still do something with. But we still don't have a pure leucistic solid white animal in bloods. So I mean, at least for the short term, a very some gene that interacts and makes a very high white pied is still, I think, going to be a pretty. I mean, I can only envision a 6 foot full blown adult female white blood would be awesome and shitty because mine seem to never stay white. They always got shit all over them, or they get newspaper stains on them, or whatever. I can't ever keep my pies. Always look ugly as hell, But hey, it'd still be cool even if we get there.
Yeah, I forget the importance to a leucistic in a community because I've been doing ball pythons for too long, and it's become somewhat of a throwaway. Like it's depressing to make a white snake because there's so many ways of doing it. But communities do go nuts over it. Now, I don't know a lot about the import and export on that. Is exporting hard on blood pythons?
Is it hard on the snake?
Not hard on the snake so much, but I think when we talk leucistics, any Asian market will always go obsessive over anything pure white in a species. So I was just curious, like, are there any of those markets available for the blood python breeders in the United States?
Oh, I'm sure they are. I mean, so I can tell you that when I let my export permit and my master file CITES go probably about maybe 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when kind of I just was not shipping as much ball python stuff. I let it go. And actually, when I bought that wrought iron from Tracy, is when I said, you know what, let me get my master file back. So I reapplied, got my master file, made sure I add Bronger's Mai to it. I don't have any Brittenstein eye, but I do have some Curtis. So I added Bronger's Mai and Curtis to my master file, got my export permit back. And then as soon as I started making wrought iron stuff, and then especially as soon as I posted that, I had pied stuff, I've got quite a bit of international customers on wait lists looking high interest, and that's Europe to Asia to UAE. Quite a few customers globally interested in blood python stuff. So that I mean, we're not able to supply the demand for some of that stuff in the U.S. And hey, I mean, to me, really, honestly, when I do start making pied stuff, I may not even sell anything in the U.S. But we've got Elijah and Nick and John and Mike and some other guys that can supply stuff to the U.S. and hey, we'll see how it goes. But no, there's already, at least from what I've been able to see from what I've done in the last couple of years with some rare stuff, there's a huge demand globally for it. So it's going to be big, I think.
Yeah, even in Latin America, I know typically we work with Asian markets and European markets, but because part of my culture, I look down south and I can see how much the hobby is growing down there. And there is, for example, there's a guy in Mexico that is important. He already has druids, he already had head pies, he already has pretty much most of the high-end morphs down there, except for the Wolf Iron. And that's in Mexico, and that's just going to drip down all the way to South America. So that's another market that is going to grow exponentially in the next 10 years. So speaking of that, when I posted those GoldenEye wrought irons on Instagram, at least 10 messages from European breeders asking, like, how can I get those animals over here? And they were just throwing money, like, I'll give you 50,000, 100,000. I'm like, whoa. No. First of all, I can't sell any because my boss, Tracy Parker, won't let me. But it's something that is gaining a lot of attention globally. So definitely something that as Tim was saying, if for some reason we feel like the market in the US is getting saturated, there's a lot of outlets, and we just need to work on those master sightings, myself included.
I couldn't agree more with all that. And I think it was, the Mexican market is very unique. Tim knows about this. Different countries have come on after the United States, and it usually is very hot and heavy for about a 5 year to 10 years until they get everything they want, and then they kind of calm down. But I have watched a couple things, just hearing about the moves, the shows down there. I find the Mexican market very fascinating because, again, it's a brand new market for us, and it's right next door, so I'm sure they'll be buying a lot from us.
Exactly.
But we'll get back to that. You want to answer that question? I saw you nod when that any plans for going T negative.
Down, that's coming next year. We're gonna be doing red eye line T neg to wrought iron.
Very cool. Very cool.
It's saturated reds.
Cherry bomb stuff is all T negative, right?
T positive.
Oh, the cherry bomb is T positive. Is there anything in the T negative that does any color enhancers yet that'll like bring more reds out? Is that?
Yeah, to my knowledge, the red eye line is the one that I have. It's a little different from the common T neg, and they seem to be redder. I can show you some snakes later if you want to. I can pull snakes if you want. That's why I'm here.
No, of course.
But they seem to be a little redder, or a lot redder, and it's just from essentially an animal that was wild caught. It's not even a lion bred trait. Yet we can still, add more enhancers to it, or better lineage, like martyrs, Red Bulls, lilies. And I'm pretty sure those animals will explode in color because they look amazing in the T plus version. It's just that we haven't, got the job done in terms of T-neck, because we immediately went for the morphs. We didn't add like good blood lineages, but that's something that people can take on. I mean, it's an open ocean.
Yeah. Well, I remember the red-eyed stuff on the diaries on her page, and that was a little while ago.
Yep.
I remember reading it. I can't remember all the details, but I thought that was pretty cool in itself. Like I said, I remember the albinos looked better. I think there was a side-by-side where you could see how much more color the other one had. No, that's cool. I like that. It's gonna be a fun direction. Back to just like the market in general, and here's the thing, like, as bad as some people say things are right now, I think it's just people need to be wowed. And the market is so big right now, and people are willing. I know a lot of ball python guys that want to invest in something new. I know boa guys that want to go after new stuff. And here's the thing, Tim remembers this, 20 years ago, blood pythons were going to be the next ball python. Everybody said that. I think a lot of it was based on the stuff we saw at Tracy's house. I think bloods are actually coming on right now at probably the best time possible, because the market has got so much bigger, and also we're seeing bigger prices on animals that I remember in probably the last 10 years. People are taking chances. People are going big instead of buying in low, and I like that about it. So like what you said, you guys are a world market right now for blood pythons, and between the Pied, the Rod Iron, the Druid, and a few other genes right now, I mean, those are high demand genes with a very low supply. So as long as you guys manage it properly, I don't think you're going to see a lot of big price adjustments if there's always buyers out there.
Correct.
They don't fuck up your markets.
No, we'll try not to. I'm trying not to.
I'm going to tell you what, I think some of the beauty of blood pythons, not that they're difficult to breed, but I think, if you start trying to get to a sizable blood python collection, you'll find out you don't want to do that. They're a big enough animal that I don't think you're going to see a lot of people with 150, 200 blood pythons breeding those things to crank out big numbers. I just don't think you want to hold on to collections of that kind of size. So I think the animal, the inherent, the nature of the animal, the size of the animal, hey, it's not a retic, it's not a berm, I realize that, but that piece of the species is probably going to help control some of the production of that, in the short term at least, and we'll see where that goes. But I can't envision myself ever letting my blood python collection get as big as I let the ball python collection get at one point. I just don't think I'll let that happen. It's more difficult to manage for sure.
I think when I look at bloods, I look at it the same way of expanding on new boa projects. I'm not going to go after 12 boas. I'll probably go after 6 boas, and I'm going to want to be a little nicer. So I'm not going to get like crazy and buy something super simple. With them being blood pythons aren't huge, but it's a big python. It's a full body animal. It's definitely needs some good floor space. Even going after 6 really high end projects right now, I mean, you could drop 50, 60K real easily if you want to go for the big boy projects.
Hey, Dave, it's MJ. Can you do me a favor? Exit out, come right back in. We're going to go to commercial break because your audio is really bad right now. So exit out and come right back in. We'll see you guys in a couple minutes.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Sorry for the interruption, folks, but a quick word from our sponsors. Very excited to announce today's sponsor, and of course, it's the one and only Reptile Super Show, happening January 11th and 12th, 2025 at the Pomona Convention Center. This is going to be quite the time. I hope you guys are ready. I'm going to be vending. I have plenty of friends flying into town. Most diversity display of reptiles. There's no better show to go to than the Reptile Super Show, happening January 11th and 12th, Pomona, California. Head over to reptilesupershow.com, get your tickets, make sure you place your hotel reservations if needed. There's directions, all sorts of amazing stuff on the website. You can also follow Reptile Super Show on Instagram to be on top of all current events. But no matter what, I will see you at the Reptile Super Show 2025. Thank you so much, Rami, for throwing such an amazing show. It is the best show, and that's why you got to be there. I'll see you guys at the next Reptile Super Show. Cheers. One of the things I love about being a part of the reptile industry is all the learning, okay? Learning can be fun, and I can prove that to you. Thank you so much to today's sponsor, Gary Scavino over at GS Reptiles. I highly recommend you head over to his YouTube channel, follow all this man's content when it comes to learning about rare species of snakes you could be keeping in the hobby, and also just finding out how easy a lot of these rare species of snakes are to keep in general. So thank you so much, Gary Scavino of GS Reptiles. Again, head over to his YouTube channel. Also head over to his Instagram to be on top of all of his current work and be ready for a big year over at GS Reptiles. Thank you so much, Gary, for your ongoing support. I really appreciate it. Green tree pythons, emerald tree boas, and plenty other arboreal snakes have been quite the popularity here at the Trap Talk Reptile Network, which brings me to today's sponsor, the Reptile Perch. Head over to thereptileperch.com and Reptile Perch on Instagram. See what type of design PVC perch is best for your arboreal reptile. But first and foremost, I would also check out David Brom's Green Tree Python availability on the website. And you can also check out his Instagram just to stay current on any projects or any productions that he posts. Thank you so much, David Broms, for your ongoing support. Looking forward to seeing what you have to show in the 2025 season. So, guys, what do you think of Dave Levinson? I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, you guys known him for a while, right? But what a guy, huh?
I fucking love Dave. I've known Dave a long time.
I just met him like 56 minutes ago, and I love the guy already.
He reminds me of a guy like he's like the lead singer of his own band, but he leaves the stage and then does other shit and forgets and like I don't know. You know.
Yeah. I like that kind of like ADHD type of personality. He's pretty cool.
So while we're waiting for him to come back, I got to ask, do you have what's going on, Tim? Do you run a customer service department over there? Or what's?
No, that's my landline's ringing. Somebody's calling. They think
you got a landline still?
Yeah, I got one in my house and one in my business. I mean, dude, I've got a phone number that my snake business has had for 21 years. It's hard to give up something that you paid $19 a month for that rings 15 times a day. I mean, I still make sales on that thing, and it's been in the phone book and the yellow pages, and it's a business listing for over 20 years. To me, that's invaluable.
No, hell no. I mean, listen, you've been doing it. I get it. Ernesto, I'm pretty sure you don't have a landline. Do you have a landline?
No, not anymore. I think no. That when I was in Mexico, I had a landline. No, when I moved to the U.S., just cell phones.
Damn. And Ernesto, how long have you been to the U.S. now?
13 years. I moved here back in 2013. No, wait a minute. It's not 13 years, is it? 11. 2013 was when I moved here.
And where are you at in the country? What part?
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Damn. How do you like Texas?
Yeah, this is your house, man. Whenever you want to come.
No, but how you like Texas?
Oh, I love it. I always joke about it. I said I was born Mexican, but rebirth Texan. I love this place.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of Latinos and Latinas in Texas. I'll tell you that much.
For sure. Well, Austin has a little bit of a different vibe. It's a college town, so you get people from all over the world, and it's very diverse. If you go a little south, like San Antonio or McAllen, then yeah, it's like developed Mexico.
All right. Well, I'll let you get back to your freak show. All right. Have a.
It's bad, isn't it? Sorry, buddy.
It's better. You're good. Just continue.
Yeah, I'm good for technical difficulties every once in a while. You haven't been able to see it. Now it's only me. I've been cupping the back of my phone this whole time so I could hear you guys talk because that's how bad this fucking audio is. So
is it any better now?
No, it's just as bad. I'm gonna sit here with my fucking hand behind it this whole time. It's awful. It's awful. All right, so back to like he said, this shit show. I think that's what he said.
Freak show. My bad, freak show. So I think it's a shit show. Not the show in general, just this moment. Okay, so where do we leave off?
About collections and size of the collection.
Oh, collection size, management not going too big, no reason to put too much out in the market. We don't see imports anymore at all now because Bushmaster is kind of done for the most part, and I don't think anybody's out there scouting. Dead in the water right now. Everything's captive bred in the United States.
Not everything. I mean, I still go to some local shows and you see some stuff. And matter of fact, one of my local buddies, Zach, Zach just picked up a freaking animal that I think is probably going to be a new mutation in bloods, and he picked it up off a table at one of the local shows. Like, look at this freaking thing, and it looks, it's like a Brittenstein eye and a Bronger's Mai cross. And matter of fact, we were talking at the local show about he got this thing earlier in 2024, so he's had it almost a year, maybe 9 months, something like that. But I sent him a best way to describe it's just a head down view, Brittenstein eye, Bronger's Mai, and Curtis scalation. I was like, look at this thing compared to that animal. See if you can identify it specifically into one of those species, because it looks almost like it's got Brittenstein eye in it. But I mean, sure enough, scalation point. It looks pure Bronger's Mai, but it's got crazy colors, a little bit of pattern. So there's still some stuff coming in. It's definitely nowhere near where it used to be, but they're still bringing in some imports, and they may be farmed. It may be some stuff, coming from Cameron's farm, or who knows. But there's still a little bit coming in, not as much, just because there's still not a huge demand for blood. So I think we're meeting the demand with the supply that we're being able to produce captively in the U.S. But there's still some stuff out there. You can find some wild caught stuff every now and again.
And then you have your morphs that randomly popped, or they just kind of go under the radar, like the Sonergene that Nick Bottini essentially found in his collection with the golden eyes. And it's like, wait a minute, this look a little different. Let's put them together. And all of a sudden it's like, oh hell, this is a brand new morph, and now we have the Sonergene going on. Like in Europe, the black eye, Jesper Lund had that one pop randomly out of an ivory. The ivory had perfect eyes, and then this thing has jet black eyes. And then Graham Batson got that animal, bred it, and proved it an incomplete dominant mutation. So, between the imports and random occurrence, I think there's still a lot of things that we can develop.
Oh no, for sure. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying the other way. And I will say, Tim, one thing I love about that is, in the modern day hobby, you wouldn't think there would still be something like that at a show you come across that would go unnoticed. But still to this day, I know people that'll travel or will walk the show every time just to see what's laying around, even at the small ones. You get some real gems out there sometimes. We even talked about it. It was a while ago, but Junior with his Arctic gene, he found that at a show on someone's table. Didn't even realize what it was for like 8 years. And then he finally took the super Arctic route, which has been great for him.
I got mad because I got complacent. I was at that show that Zach was at, and I'm like, why didn't I find that thing, man? You're gonna make hundreds of thousands off that animal, and I could have bought it, but I got complacent. I got to the point where when I walked by we used to call them flesh peddlers, but you walk by just somebody that's flipping a bunch of captive or wild caught stuff. I got complacent and didn't want to look at it anymore. But you forget that's where everything comes out of the wild, most everything at some point in time. So hey, it's all it took for me now for the last year. It's the first place I'll beeline to when I go to a show is all the wild caught tables, to start looking again and see if there's something weird there. If you got good quarantine practices at your facility, it doesn't freaking matter. The only risk you have is it might die. That's always a risk, but that's been a risk, forever.
Yeah. And not only the importers too, but the guys in the hobby that are always getting animals from other people to sell, the low-key guy that maybe isn't posting online. I had somebody call me one time. He was a buddy who just always got new stuff in. He sold me a white Leachianus in a parking lot in North Carolina. It wasn't that much money for what the animal truly could have been worth at the time was put in. I ended up I sold it to another lychee guy because I've never really been a big lychee breeder. But yeah, you never know, man. Anybody who gets a lot of animals going through their collection in and out, those guys always have a diamond in the rough.
Yep.
But let's see. So Ernesto, a little bit more about the Mexican market. Have you been to any of the shows down there yet?
Not yet. That is something I have in the books. I haven't even been to many shows here in the U.S. I don't have time. I work in healthcare, and my life is super busy all the time. I don't even have weekends sometimes, so it's hard to schedule those trips. And when I go down there is to visit family, because mainly the shows that happen in Mexico or in the big cities, which is Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Mexico City. My family lives in Cancun, which is, I don't know, it's like saying my family lives in Florida and the shows are happening in Colorado, Boston, and Washington State. So it's hard for me to work that logistic. But I know people down there that do attend those shows and band there, and they say it's crazy. I mean, it's picking up in a lot of popularity. And is Miguel Garcia the one that is promoting?
Miguel.
Yeah, right. And he has like a breeding facility down there.
Yes. So I don't know how much you nerd out on this stuff, but MJ did a podcast with Miguel and Justin Quebecer recently. And honestly, I thought one of the most fascinating parts of the conversation was hearing Miguel talk about the development of the Mexican market, even talking, like you said, the caliber of blood pythons that are down there. He was just talking about the caliber of ball pythons that are down there now compared to what you saw in that market 5 years ago. Also, the fact that he did talk about how some of the animals down there in that market were selling for more money than what we were selling them for up here and a lot of ball python stuff.
Correct.
So, that's, I got with a couple buddies of mine that are working with a few different species that I didn't hear a whole lot in that market down there. And I told them that they might want to talk to Miguel and maybe create a relationship, have somebody that can middleman certain things that's really familiar with that market, helping develop it. Like I said, new markets are always good for the hobby, and they're down there spending right now.
Absolutely. And it can also come the other way around. We can start importing animals that are native from Mexico, start breeding them in captivity and bringing them to the US, because bringing animals from Mexico is not as easy as it is taking animals from the US into Mexico, because the regulations are crazy down there. It's like you need a ton of permits, you need to have specific buildings. It's just a nightmare. So if we can achieve that, then it's going to be like a cross pollination, if that makes sense, right? We're going to be bringing species and we're going to be taking species. So it's going to be very interesting. I would love to get in contact with Miguel and see if we can work something out with blood pythons.
Yeah, fascinating guy, real business oriented. Like I said, I hadn't paid attention to too much that he's been doing the last couple of years. I popped in a couple videos, but hearing that conversation, I went back and listened to it a couple times. I enjoyed it so much. I'll send you the link after this. So you can go give it a listen. Like I said, I thought it was very fascinating. I always loved hearing about the economic side of the industry. I get caught up in the colors and I love all that, but I absolutely love the business side of it too. What is got anything new you're going to be chasing in blood pythons this year? Like you said, you're up to 13 mutations. I know there's probably something else out there you don't have yet.
And I was putting a list together earlier. I have projects from 2024 all the way down to 2030, and it's like different pairings. A lot of these things are essentially mutations that we already have in the market, but haven't been developed a lot. One of them being the pale gray stuff. Pale gray has been around for at least 15, 20 years, but it's a recessive mutation. And when you look at a pale gray, you need to be able to see it in person to appreciate it. So it's been under the radar for the longest time. So this year, Nick Bottini and I kind of paired up to produce double heads, pale gray, T plus albino, and see if we can replicate something similar to the sunset Borneos in blood python. So we can use that palette towards different morphs and projects. So I have that female, she's due to lay eggs in like 2 weeks. Plus the super raw tyrants, that female is in the post-ovulation shed right now. So it's also another month and we're going to see some eggs. And then I want to go heavy on the Sonder project, flower, and the pies.
Very cool. Very cool. So I asked you initially when we first started talking if you're doing any videography, any editing yourself. Your Rod Iron video, which I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a good marketing video. I thought that was something really cool that, even if you're not in the hobby on the outside looking in, it would probably catch someone's attention. Do you plan on doing more stuff like that in blood pythons?
Yeah, I have a website, and that website is like my baby. I really put a lot of effort and time in that. But then when you go to the analytics, you see how it's very unused by people. And there's, like good pictures, good information there. But I was thinking maybe if I start doing this kind of content, like videos, but like morph related or husbandry or whatever, people will be more interested in blood pythons. So I'm leaning towards that right now. I just need to find the time to achieve that goal. So I wanted to start with some morphs, like showcasing more certain characteristics, so people can have like a visual guide of these things, and it's going to be a little bit easier and more digestible content. Because I know a lot of people don't like reading, and I love writing, but it's just like long ass posts, and half of the time you can see they click, is like spend like 2 seconds on the site and they leave. It's like, oh man, I spent 3 months writing this thing and no one cares about it. So yes, long story short, I want to do it, but more towards the content and on the website, but make it more user friendly or digestible.
Yeah, so I always talk to people because sometimes when I try to get the older breeders on here, they're all like, I don't know. And I'm like, here's the deal. People aren't reading like they used to. And it's a sad thing about the hobby. So, people need to get their information a different way. I think this is great. I love podcasting, love having people on. I think it's really good. And even people that are a little skeptical about it, I feel like when they get in the rhythm of it, they love it too. But the marketing of your species, I give, and I'm not going to bring them up again because we're not talking about ball pythons, but Justin Quebeca put in a weekly video out every Friday, same time, about the same time slot, like 6 or 8 minutes long, nothing too crazy, showcases a couple things, really good for the species. People's attention span can handle 10 minutes or under. So when we make these jokes about them not willing to read something you put time into or wherever else, those short videos do go a long way without trying to be like a TikTok star. I'm still not going to download TikTok. I'm not into that at all. I don't do any of that social media stuff. But no, I would encourage you. I'm sure he's going to listen to this too. But like a guy like Brandon Nixon, he's a guy that's been doing a lot of good video stuff. I could see you putting in the effort like he has in your species. And he's a guy that overlaps a lot of different species too. But no, I encourage you to keep on doing it. Like I said, I enjoyed it. And I think people on the outside looking in, that'll draw them in. So someone's got to do it. Tim's not gonna. I could see him like losing interest the whole time we're talking about this.
No, I wish I had the time to do it. But
Sure.
I do know I've done a few videos in the past, and I'll tell everybody I don't have the time or the energy to edit. So when I do something, it's pure raw. Like, hey, here's 5 minutes of pure raw. If it's screwed up, whatever, it is what it is, But I need to do more videos, even if it's 2 minutes of cell phone. I probably should be posting more myself. I'm all on it. I ran out of time 5 years ago for stuff, and I'm trying to recreate time, and I can't figure out how to do it. So,
well, certain species get all the content, and where I'm like, oh, should I do an ultrasound video? And I'm like, why the hell would I do an ultrasound and video on boas when there's probably 5,000 out there? But I feel like blood pythons have always teetered on the edge of popularity, but have always had their spot in the hobby. And I don't know of much really, really good blood python content, but I also might not be looking hard enough. Juggernaut might be doing more than I think, and I might be spitting in his face right now for all I realize. But I, again, encourage people in that community with the caliber of animals you guys are working with now. Not that they weren't there before. I've loved the evolution of blood pythons. I love the way the GoldenEye stuff. I love the GoldenEye batik stuff. I can't wait to see the batik pied because we saw the monsoon pied and ball pythons looked pretty good. The white ratio was really nice. Like I said, the evolution's been good because you guys keep on getting one more good ingredient, and a couple of your best ingredients were just added in the last couple of years with wrought iron and pied. So get out there. I just keep on marketing the way you are and keep on popping up videos. It's only going to help you guys long term. And again, anytime anybody stops making money in ball pythons, they want to throw their money at the next big thing. You guys are in a really good spot right now where I always say ball python money is really nice. Like ball python money, I don't know anybody who spends like ball python people. I'm not trying to be an asshole. Even I was talking about buying more Hondurans the other day, and I went on MORPH Market and I was like, okay, Hondurans for $2,000, 0 ads, $1,500, 1.2 group of breeders. Like certain species are stuck where they're at. And I know that's an old school one, but blood pythons are fascinating. I literally own one blood, and it's a big red male. He scares the fuck out of me, but our relationship is getting better. But when I say he's big, I mean, he's my garbage disposal. He's a fat motherfucker. He's probably going to die young because I'm feeding him too much. I'll send you a picture afterwards, Tim. You let me know if I'm doing something wrong. But
right, if you're feeding him more than every 3 weeks, it's too much.
He eats every 3 weeks, but it might be a few meals in that sitting. I mean, he can handle, man. He'd probably eat some nice sized rabbits if I really wanted to. I'm not trying to push him. I'll be honest, like, he took one snap at me like 2 years ago, and I've always been a little cautious about blood pythons, and I know it's probably my fault, but I mean, when I take him out now, I'm cradling him like a baby, really dispersing that body weight. I mean, I'm terrified of him. I'm letting him know he's in charge the whole time.
Hey, what temps do you keep them at? I'm curious. What are the temps on that?
So I actually have my hotspot. They're at the bottom of my 6-foot Freedom Breeder rack. So the lowest temperature tub is where I have them. The hotspot, honestly, probably sitting more of like an 86 down there. And the concrete floor underneath brings up a little bit of cool. So I bet you there's a cool spot. I'll temp gun it later. I bet you it's 72 to 74 and 86.
86. Isn't that correct me if I'm wrong, Tim and Ernesto, but isn't that warm for no, that's perfect.
Well, 86 is about what I would call the high end. My hot spots are 86, and my room normally sits somewhere between 78 and 82, depending on if it's winter or summer. So 86 is not bad. It's
nice.
But I mean, you start touching 88, it's not far before they'll start getting ugly. So I mean, like I tell everyone, 86 is about the high end you need to be. Maybe 87, but there's no need.
So he could even afford coming down a little bit then.
Oh, he could. It wouldn't hurt anything.
Yeah, maybe try that.
But I don't think that's hurting anything at 86.
Yeah, I can show you my parameters here. I think that's like my secret sauce, because I can just open any tub and just grab the snakes. I don't have any snake that shows any kind of defensiveness. My sweet spot right now, it's like 79 ambient temperature, 66 humidity, and that's pretty much it. The racks, they have the hitting plates in the back, and they go 82, 84 max. I don't let it go any higher than that. And they digest well, they shed perfect, they don't get sick, no respiratory infections. If I go any higher, like Tim was saying, 86, 87, then they get cranky.
Yeah, see, that's why I mentioned that, Dave, because when I had a huge group, not a huge group, but I had about 8 at one point, and majority of them were so mean, and that's because I was keeping them like ball pythons, and they had 88 hot spot. And as soon as I put everything on the lower rack with no heat, they were just ambient at that point. They all became puppy dogs. They all became the nicest snakes in the world. So that's the only reason why I wanted to chime in about that, because I bet even maybe bumping down the temps for that snake, I bet it just probably prefers. It's a big boy too, so maybe you don't know. God bless. Good luck.
It is possible you can pull that heat. Tracy's been on my ass for years to take the heat off of my blood pythons, and I'm not. I argued with Tracy, but I won't argue with her rationale, which is they don't need it. And I've always been the proponent of, hey, I will agree. You're probably correct, Tracy. However, I've got animals that have been in there at 86-degree hotspots for 10 or 12 years. I'm not changing what's not broken. Like, it's not causing me problems. I don't want to change. I don't want to take the risk of changing something when it's not an issue. But knowing what I know now, if I were to start over, I probably wouldn't give any of my animals hot spots, because I don't think they're needed. As long as you're giving them something in the neighborhood of close to 80 degrees somewhere in the enclosure, they're probably fine if you're not giving them that by heat, which, like I said, most of the time in the summer, I'll fight, and I may spike to 85 degrees in my room ambient, in the dead 110 degrees outside. I may get that. But most of the time, my room stays around 82 degrees, 80 degrees. And so I could probably get away with no hot spot at all. I don't want to change it on, especially adult females that have been breeding for me for years.
But Tim, you also keep other species in your with your blood pythons, right? You're not like exclusive blood python.
I've got one big giant rack. It's an ARS rack that's got those big giant vision tubs in it. That is a blood python rack. I have a couple of Gila monsters at the top of that rack. And then I've got another one of the Freedom Breeder Tracy 2-bangers, the ones that are 2 tubs wide. I've got that rack that is nothing but blood pythons. And then I've got 2 blood pythons in another boa rack that's got some boas in it. So that rack's a little cooler. And then like I've got a handful of bloods. I've probably got 2 bloods that are in my baby grow up ball python rack, but they're on the very bottom. They're probably a little warmer than they need to be, but they normally are only in that rack for about 3 or 4 months before they outgrow it. But then like all my babies for sale are in another room that is in an ARS rack, and it's nothing but ball pythons in that room. But that one whole rack is cooler than the ball racks, and I put bloods and boas in that rack, babies that are for sale. So most of my bloods don't share a rack with balls or species that require temperature, but I do have a couple of balls just because of where they fit in the room at the time, or are sharing a rack with some other species. But the bulk majority of my collection is in racks that are just for them, so they're dialed in pretty good for bloods.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So floating around up north. So I'm honestly, which sucks. I think I'm going to be on like my 4th or 5th different spot I've kept reptiles in the last like 8 years, 9 years. So it's always that settling into the new spot. But so with that blood, he is in a boa rack. He's in the biggest freedom breeder tub you can buy rack, the ones that are like 6 feet, a little over 6 feet long. So he does have a big gradient of going back and forth. And honestly, I find him kind of moving around that tub a good bit. You can tell by the way the bedding's pressed, and he's never really hanging out in one spot. So it seems like there is a gradient. I'm going to get some better temp guns on it, but I'd have to put a thermostat on his own level to make it completely different, which is probably the right thing to do. When he tried biting me, we were on ambient. I think it was the way I was holding him. I think I did it in such a way that he let me know I was doing it wrong.
Right.
And he didn't get me, but he let me know. And, too, like, I was bringing up about how they always had these, the reputation of being nasty in the hobby. And we always blamed a lot of that on the wild caughts coming in back in the day. But also at the same time, early 2000s, people kind of kept pythons all the same in the same rack system, blood next to a ball, next to a boa, with that same hotspot at 88 to 91 degrees. So you can almost guarantee a lot of those ones back in the day, not only was it issues with imports being nasty, but a lot of it was probably stress from heat.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, and I think we also have this idea that just because it's a tropical species, all tropical jungle is the same, and that's not the case, right? If you go to the jungle, you can find different temperatures, even in the same ecosystem. And when these guys are at, which is at the ground level, that's way cooler than above, like at our height. You could be breathing air that is 86, but if you temp gun the floor, it's, I don't know, like, sorry, yeah, 86. You can temp the gun pointing at the floor, and it's going to be 82. All could be 75 if it's in a burrow. So they have like all these different gradients, and we have these ideas like, oh, it's a tropical species, so it's going to be hot and warm and humid, and it's not always the case. So that's why sometimes I feel it's hard for people to dial their collections, because when you have a diverse collection, well, you have to have like a common, ground. It's like, okay, it's gonna be more like tropical-ish environment. But if you have like a more sensitive species like blood pythons, you get them too hot, they get cranky. Or if you get a rainbow boa, if it's not humid enough, they will die. It's kind of hard to find that balance. So that's why to
Yeah.
me it was like a no-brainer. Like, I'm just gonna keep all blood pythons, and I'm gonna make this entire room their house, right? So it's so much easier to get that done.
Yeah, that it's a tough thing in the hobby is I love everything. I want to work with everything. I'll never work with everything. But even like, if I'm gonna do something clubrid related, I want stuff with similar temperatures, even if it's from different countries. There's a few things you could always mix in that area. And same thing when it comes to pythons, boas, stuff like that. Boas and ball pythons in the same environment, do just fine. Humidity about the same, hot low spot about the same. I think me in the hobby, and I don't know if I've necessarily been doing it wrong, but like I feel I've always had the low side of my room in the mid 70s to low 70s, and by low, like 72 to 74. Like there was never really a time early in the hobby where I could customize a room the way I wanted to, because it was always like living in an apartment, I had them in this room, always set at 72 in the house. So I've always really regulated with the hotspot temperature, and I never really ran into any issues with illness or anything like that along the way. I never really thought that large gradient was a bad thing. I thought that 15 degrees in between the hot spots and the cool spot was actually better for them across the board in a lot of species, but that's just me. But I also love ambient. I did ambient for years. I think we set the building at 82 to 84, and we did very well with the pythons. Boas, I didn't really like doing boas at ambient. I feel like they really do need that heat gradient, and I found that I was actually putting those rack systems closer to the wall where there was some cool air, not cool air, but a cooler air environment, and then I had their hotspot on, you know. But that's, yeah, like I said, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can keep your animals healthy. That's all that matters.
Yeah, 100%.
But, again, when I was talking about like things you can do to contribute to the hobby, for the new people coming in, inching in, talking temperatures, I think is a big thing with this species. Humidity, I think, is talking a big thing. Because I know a lot of guys that keep their animals on bedding, and I also know a lot of blood python guys that keep them on paper. So respect. I'm back on bedding now. I went back to paper for a little while, but man, he fucked that paper up like every 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I changed them yesterday. I know I have to change them today because I can smell it.
Yeah.
They just pee a lot, man. These whoever thinks blood pythons are not high maintenance, man, like you're not keeping enough of them because they'll keep you busy all week long. It's crazy the amount of urine they produce because they
So
crave that fresh water, so they're drinking fresh water constantly. You have to change those bowls at least every other day, if not daily. And man, as it goes in, it goes out.
yes. Water changes too, and MJ always emphasizes on that. I think all of the green tree python guys really like to keep the water perfect. That's one thing that I will say early in the hobby, sometimes cleaning was based on like a 3 or 4 day schedule, which means it could have been if they accidentally did some of their water on Monday and I didn't check till Thursday, shame on me. That's definitely one thing that I've tried to get a lot better at. I'm getting to the point now where it's check an animal a day. Took a while to get back there. It's a little more work, but at the same time, man, once you get that rhythm going, as long as you don't take 2 or 3 days off, it's like half the work, a quarter of the work usually is. It's like you're done in minutes. So routine's everything. And I'm sure, with you guys keeping on paper though, like why paper?
Control of the colony. That way you can pick up issues a lot easier, and also it's way cheaper when you have these animals that are constantly, producing waste. If you keep them on substrate, your bill on substrate is going to be astronomical, right? Because I don't think spot cleaning is very good for these guys because of the amount of waste. Yeah, the COCO can absorb some of that, but then you're going to run into issues like ammonia buildup, fungus building up. So to me, it's a lot easier just to keep a good eye on the colony. And I can pick up issues if I notice that an animal is having, I don't know, diarrhea or signs of respiratory infection. I can pick it up quickly because I can find the mucus on the paper. And as you can see, everything is essentially clear or semi-clear, so I can walk in the room and do a quick checkup every single day. So to me, it's just about, as you said, efficiency. Because right now I have about 60 blood pythons. So if I keep them on substrate, they love burrowing, so they hide, and they also hide their waste. So it's very hard to keep track of what's happening in each enclosure.
Yeah, I really like those clear polycarbonate tubs. Honestly, a lot of the ARS racks I have here now, I'm probably going to switch out the gray tubs and go to the clear ones. I like seeing my animals. I saw Junior's collection for the first time. He's a hognose breeder.
Mhm.
All it is those clear 50-40 tubs for ARS, and seeing all those beautiful snakes at the front of the tub while you're in there. It's nice not having to open it all the time to get a good look at your animal.
Correct.
And with the blood pythons, do they seem agitated ever by seeing that extra movement in the room, or do you find that might actually calm them down getting used to it?
To me, the first week they did, because I didn't have this is a brand new rack that I got within the year. With the semi-clear, most of the animals in the beginning seem to be agitated when I walk by, or if they're sleeping, you walk by. I have a pair of blue beauty animals, and you have this extra lighting going that direction. So my shadow sometimes trigger, a response, but they don't strike. They kind of just pull back. But they get used to it. And I don't know, within a week, 2 weeks, they get used to that movement. And since this is a low traffic area, I'm the only one coming in the room. They tolerate it fairly well. I wouldn't put this in a very high traffic area because they can get spooked. These are secretive animals and they hate, like to be exposed. But at least in this case, it works very good for me and what I do in the room.
So, I love talking the medical side of this because nobody usually does. I feel like it scares people. You mentioned sometimes, blood pythons do run into RIs, which I have heard in the past. In your opinion, there's a lot of different things, of course, that can cause an RI. What do you feel is a big contributor to an RI in bloods? And when you do run into that, what is your next step?
Oh wow, okay, that's a heavy question. To me, the ones I've seen, the few and far between, were caused by nidovirus, and I caught those early during quarantine stages. So I was able to control that, and that never came into my racks. Um, but low humidity and low air circulation promotes that, and Steve Till is the one that essentially is working with all that and it's producing a lot of knowledge. It seems to be a strain of nidovirus that kind of comes and goes. So if you have recurrent nidovirus, respiratory infections, it's also a good idea to check for the nidovirus strain, because as long as the animal is not stressed, not in the reproductive cycle, it's completely asymptomatic. And it seems to be like these viruses can stay dormant for years until something triggers the respiratory symptoms. So I think as long as you keep your parameters correctly and you test your animals, you're not just doing the quarantine the wrong way, and you're actually following the steps. Keep them in a separate room, use different utensils, equipment, wash your hands, don't use the same clothes, all these things. You can prevent respiratory infections in blood pythons, because when they get them, it's severe. I mean, the ones that actually got them, we have to put them down. They're not in this world anymore.
Uh, so here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with that because that's the responsible thing to do. I don't think there's any pet breeding trade where they just keep animals in circulation. And again, it's only going to cause more in the spread. In boa constrictors, arenavirus is the big one right now. It started getting real big in Europe, and it's popping up here. I've heard a couple collections. I'm getting ready to test. I'm going to do a swab in every one of them. If you guys find my Facebook page, I'll send you a link to a lab you could hook up on a thing like that. But like $20-$30 a test, and I can know every one of my animals is fine. But even so with nidovirus, because like you said, a lot of these animals live with it. Females tend to run into more stress, and stress is going to induce it to come out, where they'll start shedding the virus. Males, a lot of males will live with it, and there's nothing to add stress to their environment. You may never even know your male has anything wrong.
Exactly.
With that being said, with bloods, does nido pass on to the babies?
Just if you're doing maternal incubation, but it's not a direct pass like with boas, because if they're doing maternal incubation, they're breeding on top of the eggs constantly, and when the babies hatch, then it's a cross contamination, but because of the direct contact between the baby and the mom. If you take the eggs and separate them, that 2-month period of incubation and higher temperatures than average is enough to neutralize and kill the virus. So if
Okay.
you have an animal that is nidovirus positive, you can take the eggs and put them in an incubator and then separate those babies from the infected animal. Then that's essentially a clean animal.
Yeah, because the nidovirus can only live on a surface for, I want to say, under 30 days. It might be somewhere in the 20 range, if I remember Ben Cole telling me.
Correct.
And I think I remember, I don't know if you ever saw this one, Tim, but I think it was Gourmet Rodent did a video where they were dipping ball python clutches of eggs in like a bleach water substance. And I think they actually left them dunked for like a pretty long period of time, like over a minute. And they did that because I believe Petco asked them to, because if there was anything on the egg, they didn't want it transferring to the baby, essentially. But a lot of that stuff doesn't last long enough on the outside of the egg. I just wasn't sure if that was anything that passed on by blood. Talking to arenavirus with Richard Del Bono, he had mentioned that they had positive females that had litters, and he said that they were finding about a 50-50 ratio on the babies testing positive, which I thought that was kind of peculiar. I would have thought it'd been 100% or 0. I wouldn't have thought 50% on something like that, but we didn't get into enough detail where I want to throw something out there that's wrong. But I always bring it up.
The interesting
Cryptosporidium.
thing there, I wonder, and it would probably be hard to determine for sure, but if you had an egg sac that ruptured as the baby was being born, is that the 50% that got infected because they come in contact with mom. Whereas if she lays a sac that the baby boa cuts out of later, those may not. So it would be difficult because you'd have to monitor the entire birthing process. And of course, we know they give birth sometimes in the middle of the night and you miss it. But I wonder if that's why it would be a 50-50. Because to me, that's logically in my head the only mechanical process I could come up with that would give you a ratio like that if you know mom was positive. So it'd be interesting to know if that was what happened. Is you've now taken that jacket, that protective coating for that baby, and you've removed the protection by it splitting or rupturing on the way out, and so now all of a sudden it's got contact with mom.
I honestly really like that because I think someone else mentioned that, and that is one very logical reason why that could be happening. And when you think viruses and things like that, we even talk about like cryptosporidium, which isn't a virus, but in the wild, cryptosporidium is in a lot of leopard geckos, and it's kind of like population control from lack of predators. There's a lot of things like nidovirus that I'm pretty sure would be in the wild, but Mother Nature has it in a way where it's not going to kill off an entire species. Not just so much the strong will survive, but it wouldn't just pass on to everything. And I'm sure it does wean out the weaker animals, which in nature is not a bad thing. But no, like I said, it's so hard to handle this kind of stuff too, because with somebody new coming in the hobby, they just spend a bunch of money and then they find out they have nido. It's either, oh shit, am I gonna just get rid of all these now? Am I gonna try to fight through it and see if I can turn into something okay or good? But also that inexperience, not so much the inexperience of them breeding it, because an experienced guy may do the same thing, but the inexperience of everything is just going to be downward spiral. Like everything's just going to keep getting worse. More animals in your room are going to get sick. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like a collection of any kind, but like, especially with somebody that's like new to the hobby, they just don't understand how much worse they're making it. And like, it's just drawer after drawer sometimes. And the tough love is you got to pull the plug sometimes. And, there's a proper way of doing it. But yeah, I don't, I always thought IBD would ruin boas, and I've said that for years. I thought IBD would kill off all boas, it'd be over. It never happened that way. I haven't heard about IBD in almost 10 years. And there's been a couple other things. I know, again, you brought up Nido. Nido in the carpet python community, I know, is a big thing. I believe Chondros had their deal with Nido, and they probably still have some issues. But, it's not killing these species off until we're so irresponsible, we'll do it ourselves, essentially.
Correct. And we also have to consider that the immune system is an adaptive system, right? It keeps evolving as long as there's a pathogen trying to affect the system. So it's like a race to see which one is best. It's either the virus or the immune system. So it's going back and forth. And as you said, the stronger animal or the animals that have a genetic that is tolerant to these viruses can actually offset the virus, and then they can live with it and be absolutely immune to it. We see that happening with a lot of viruses in humans. There is HIV positive patients that don't have any symptomatology, but they are very well able to transfer the virus. And I'm pretty sure in snakes happen the same thing. It's like you have animals that are positive, they don't get any symptoms from the virus, but they can pass it on to other snakes. So this is why human interaction with the animals is very important. You have to be very, very careful, very methodical about your protocols and processes in your collection. For example, in this case, with me, if I'm going to work with the animals, I start from the bottom up, and then I move up and then down, and I never go back and forth between racks. Even though this is a collection, I never go from my adults to my babies, because I know at least these are 100% clean. And if I have a suspicious animal for nidovirus, it's going to be one of the adults that I did not breed here. So I just treat them like that. Even if I have never seen symptoms of nidovirus in my collection, or respiratory or any kind of issue, if you keep that protocol, you can also offset those fires in case something goes wrong, because you can trace it down and be like, okay, it started from here and all these animals are sick, then you have a pattern. And that's how you control certain things and prevent worse damage. Does that make sense?
So I don't know the possibility, and with our hobby not being as big as it might take, I know there are vaccines and other species of animals through farming, things like that. I wouldn't imagine that there would ever be the lab that could put the effort into creating a vaccine for a nidovirus or an arenavirus. Like, I don't know if the money's there to back it up, but that would be a little bit of a game changer in the hobby.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest issues that they were having is that these viruses are RNA viruses, so it's very hard to have like a solid vaccine that works all the time because they mutate so fast and so aggressively that it's very hard. Like you can produce a vaccine, and then within like 2 3 generations, that vaccine is useless. So you'll have to keep improving that vaccine with the new virus DNA. For example, we saw that in COVID. You have the original testings, the swabs in the nose, and then you try to do the same ones with the new strains. Those doesn't work anymore. It's not catching the virus because the virus already evolved into something different. And serpentovirus and coronaviruses are pretty much cousin viruses, so they behave in a similar way. So it's very hard to produce a vaccine like that. It's possible, yeah, but as you said, who's going to put the money and the time in producing a vaccine if it's just a small section or a small segment of people, and the cost will be astronomical.
Or you
No,
run
for sure.
something similar to
Um,
what you got with flu vaccines, where most of the time you take a flu vaccine that was built on last year's strain,
Right.
so you're
You just
protected
put
against
that, yeah,
something, but you don't know that you're going to get protected against what's coming this year. So you may end
right.
up where you're always a year behind. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean it's completely ineffective. You're just only going to be a percent effective
Right.
every time.
so, with IBD, to actually test the animal, you got to get a sample of the brain. So, where I'm sitting here talking about how IBD is kind of non-existent in the hobby, it could be existent. We could just be at a generation of animals that are just dealing with it. They're strong
Right.
enough to handle it. They made it this far and they're X amount of generations later. But I don't know, man. They still scare the hell out of me, and I do. You got to take them serious. But I thought this hobby would be so much worse off at this point. Looking back 20 years, I'm glad everything's still thriving. But there was a lot of fear because even with Burmese pythons back in the day, what was the big one with Burmese pythons?
I don't
Timmy,
remember what it was, but I remember when it was going on, but I don't remember it.
that's fine. The Burmese pythons. Nobody gives a shit about that species. Um, let's see. Let's change it up for the last 20 minutes. We've been bringing it up a lot, but what do you guys think about this new Snake King documentary coming out, or offshoot of Tiger King?
Yeah, I didn't even watch the Tiger King, but I'm curious to see what's going to happen and how this could affect legislation nationwide. I had like for the longest time I have this ideology like, oh, I live in Texas. Texas is like the freedom state, right? Nothing's going to happen. But I live in Austin, so it's a very liberal place, and you see constant manifestations against people who keep animals, and it's becoming like a real threat now. And I'm afraid that these kind of documentaries expose a very dark side of the hobby, and people take it the wrong way instead of seeing us. Okay, well, we had to start somewhere. Now they're going to see us as these freakos that we just like to prevent animals from being in the wild, right? And they don't seem to understand that there is nothing wild out there anymore. Everything's so affected by human interaction. This is possibly the only way these animals are going to thrive as long as humans are on the planet Earth. So I don't know. It's a little scary, but um, I don't have really a strong point because I didn't even watch the Tiger King documentary.
No, that's fair. And I'll send you a little podcast. Gentleman named Dylan up in Canada did a honestly great breakdown, talked about characters, who he thought could be in it. Really just had a good overview on the whole thing. I went back and watched it a couple times. I'll probably watch it again this week. I don't want to obsess over it too much. I'm sure if I watch it too many times, I'm going to make a list. But I have my fears, and Tim, I want to hear about what you think about this because Tim pays more attention to laws and everything else than us combined.
Mhm.
I think Venomous more than likely will get the biggest hurt out of this. I think depending on what kind of footage they have in some of those, I think it's going to be a bad look. Even when things are actually being done what we think is right, I think it's going to be a bad look. I think when it comes to the importing side, even Dave Kaufman did that video from Africa where he showed the market where like ball pythons just like withering away in like a little like basket and things like that. And I think that's a really bad look, but there's no animal trade that doesn't have that in the world. Um, I don't know. I know we're not untouchable, and I know that we're again doing very well. We have lost some small fights, but the big fight we're still winning. There's got to be some repercussion, but at the same time too, like I understand Chim Crazy was big. I understand Tiger King was big. I'm seeing the characters that they're talking about putting in this, and don't get me wrong, these guys look entertaining, but it doesn't look the level of entertaining it is in these other documentaries I've seen. Like this could be a documentary that comes out that nobody even gives a shit about. Like nobody might watch it for all we know. So Tiger King was a one of a kind thing. There'll never be another Tiger King. That chemistry between all those crazy motherfuckers, we don't have that. I mean, there's some crazy guys in this hobby, but Tiger King was something special. How about you, Tim? What do you think? You glass half full or glass half empty on this?
Well, you brought up a couple interesting points. I was going to say at the start, I don't have anything different to say than Ernesto did. So I didn't watch the chimp one. I didn't watch any of the Tiger King stuff. So I can't really speak to those. I know a little bit just because, I have friends and I'm around people that watch TV. I don't really watch TV, but so I heard about a little bit of it. But the legislative side of it is what scares the shit out of me. I think the only thing that can come out of it is legislation. So I personally don't think there's anything good that comes out of it, only bad. So I hate to see it even come to fruition at all. But I do agree with you somewhat that knowing and hearing tidbits about Tiger King, I don't think this one's going to be another Tiger King. I think that was its own, one of a kind. It won't recreate that. And while I think that us in the hobby will find some interest in this and laugh at some things, I think, like you said, the people that know nothing about this hobby probably will not find that interesting at all. And so it's highly plausible that it flops. From the legislative aspect side of it, like you were just mentioning, I mean, really, when they look at all that, yeah, we potentially get some venomous legislation out of it, maybe some import legislation out of it. That would be great if the legislators in the U.S. looked at it and specifically targeted what the problem is. But I think in the U.S., we're really good at blanket legislation because it's easier. So I fear like it's not going to be, look at this. We got to rule out venomous and we got to rule out import stuff. Your general legislator is going to go, that's too hard to write something that specific and that pointed. Let's just say snakes are illegal now and be kept as pets. So I think we throw blanket legislation at it, and that's what scares the shit out of me. Is that I don't know that I would be, hey, we're going to fight anything they want to throw at us because you can't just let them get away with whatever they want to. But, if they targeted it towards venomous and imported stuff, I think that's an easier pill for us to tackle than just a blanket that goes, hey, we're going to take all your shit away from you. That's what scares me. So we'll see where it goes, but it's one of those like, yeah, I wish it was a Dave Kaufman documentary that we were watching and it was an internal produced thing versus something that's going to go to more than likely. Almost every reptile person in the hobby is probably going to watch. But even if everybody in the reptile hobby watched, I bet you we're still going to be like we'll be single digit percentage of the total audience. And so that other 93% of the audience is going to see something that they go, hey, we didn't know this has been happening under our nose for 50 years in the United States. This scares me. We need, that's what scares me is, I don't think we need to just rip the freaking sheet off and expose everything and let the whole world see it, because I do believe too that the bulk majority of everybody in the hobby, the three of us here and MJ and the bulk majority of the hobby are good keepers that have clean collections. And I mean, I've had multiple people, friends that know I keep snakes and walk into the building and the facility and go, man, you keep snakes in there? I go, yeah. They're like, oh man, I don't know what I pictured, but I just thought there'd be snakes crawling around everywhere. And like, man, it's clean, it's mopped, it doesn't stink. It's, wow, it's like a laboratory. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you have a perception. So I think the bulk majority of people keep their collections to an extent that if most people saw it, they would be shocked by what they were really looking at, because they wouldn't think it was that nice. You know, they just envisioned something that, hey, if you want Hollywood and advertisers to make money, you need views. And how are you going to get views? Looking at the collections that you probably won't find most of the time, that are a fucking dumpster fire, you know? So I don't know. It scares me for sure.
Well, you know, your comment too, you know, where again, 10 years ago compared to today, I mean, a lot of these rooms look like laboratories. You know, beautiful LED lights, beautiful stainless steel cages, everything's clean. You know, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, this documentary hits. Then you look at the way collections were back then, melamine racks, maybe some filthy PVC racks. You know, I honestly think the hobby looks amazing right now. I think that it looks more professional today than ever has. And honestly, the stimulus of money we had during COVID, a lot of people improved their setups because of it. And, you know, when you have guys like, you know, again, I go back to videos, you know, when you watch a guy like Justin standing in this beautiful room and everything's spotless and clean, like it makes the people watching those videos want that. It makes them strive for that. And it didn't used to be that way. You know, the people that we were looking at didn't use the best equipment you've seen in the hobby, but they were still making the best animals. Yeah, like I said, I'm hoping it's not popular because, like I said, I don't mean this in a bad way because you know all my interactions with Crutchfield have been positive. He's always been friendly to me in public. Um, I find him interesting, but I don't necessarily find him TV interesting. I think he tells wonderful stories that I think are very appealing to the hobby, but outside of the hobby looking in, you know, there's a certain sensational character you need when it comes to animal people. And, you know, honestly, an older gentleman with a rhino iguana that's trained to walk up to him in his yard and he's having interactions, if they do that in the video, it's not really going to have the same effect. And you know, I watched Tim Crazy last Friday because we were talking about this. And first off, it was in Missouri, which I had no idea was in Missouri. It was just like a minute ago too. I know the town is going in, and it's not that far from where I'm at. I didn't even realize people own monkeys in my state, but at the same time, you could do anything you want in Missouri, man. We have an auction called the Lolly Brothers auction. You could buy a giraffe. I mean, I've seen owls go for like $15,000. I've seen anything you can imagine at that auction. But I haven't heard of anything regulation pop up in the state since that. You know, maybe in the primate area, and I just wasn't paying attention. But you know, it's really a bad thing because I'm a small government guy. I think everybody is. But I do also come with terms that I think there's going to have to be some regulations at some point before we lose everything. You know, not. I understand where you're coming from, Tim. When we give an inch, they'll take a foot.
No,
But you know, Europe has changed things. They have rules about caging size and certain things. They're doing just fine. European market's still striving, and I don't know if it's going to change a lot there coming up. I don't pay enough attention. Tell you the truth, I think maybe the next podcast will have to be a European breeder. But I don't know, man. I'm torn. Like I said, I just don't think it's gonna be as popular as people think. And if it's not popular, it's not gonna have an effect on the hobby.
no, that's right. But it's just the problem there is it's a gamble. We're gambling. We're hoping it's not popular.
Right. I think. Do you guys remember when Brian Barczyk was offered to have like a TV show, and that never came to fruition because they said, "Oh, this is not going to be a popular show." Regardless, I mean, Brian Barczyk is one of the best entertainers in the reptile, right? The reptile hobby, and even with those like high hopes, the TV ended up canceling the show. And going back to what you were saying is like, yeah, it's very different having Tom Crutchfield just talking about these like situations with reptiles and people in general. If you're not into reptiles, you're not going to watch these kind of shows. I mean, I was just trying, doing the mental exercise. Can I have my family sit down and watch a reptile documentary with me? It's a freaking impossible mission. I can't. And they know I love these animals.
Yeah.
My problem there is that's where I think, so I just watched a video the other day. I didn't even notice it existed, but there's a zoo in India that this billionaire built, and I mean it's the most fantastic thing you've ever seen in your life. But you know, it's pretty much a rescue, but a zoo, and it's private zoo. I don't think it's open to the public. As a matter of fact, I think it was Forrest Galante went and visited it, and that was one of his videos. But I bring that up because if you try to do a documentary there on tigers, which they have a bunch, and they had a bunch of tiger mutations there, and talk through some of the issues with that. But if you try to do that documentary, nobody's going to watch it because nobody wants to see, you know, the legacy, Brian Barchak, clean, awesome facility with a guy that knows his stuff and keeps clean animals. And no, what do they want to build in Hollywood? They want the dark side, the Tiger King side of it. So that's my fear is that what they chase? Because they know that's what the drama that will bring the views. So do they want to see a king cobra in a cardboard box in the corner somewhere popping out in some musty dark room, and you know, somebody smuggling some freaking Fiji iguanas? You know, is that what they want to see? And if that's what they go try to get on film, that's what scares me. Because yeah, they turned Brian down because that's above board. Like nobody's gonna watch that. You know, like if you want to see that, fucking go to their goddamn zoo. You know, no, we want to see the dark side and the fucking crazy drama filled freaking side of Tiger King. You know, and if that's what they chase is that same side of our hobby, which we all know exists. There's a side of the hobby that exists like that. If that's what they try to get access to and gain access to that and put that out, that's what I'm scared of, because that is what causes major issues for us.
So one thing about you know, and again, maybe I'm forgetting some parts, but you know, in Tiger King, I don't remember seeing a lot of real animal abuse in it, but there were a lot of people talking about suspicions of animal abuse, suspicions of tigers being killed once they got to a certain size and they weren't profitable anymore at like birthday parties. And there's possibly a big hole of them over here on the property. So but again, I can't remember if there actually was that for sure, where there was evidence, or if they just painted a picture that way. And if this documentary is treated the same way, where they're painting a picture that's not real, it could still have some negative effects.
Oh yeah.
100%.
But you know, it's tough too, because you know, I know this guy that's doing it. I believe he's a chondro keeper. I believe he's a reptile guy. I don't think he's necessarily doing this to hurt the hobby. And again, if there's people out there doing wrong thing, don't do wrong thing. So I don't know. Like I said, I guess I'm looking forward to watching it. I'm sure I'm gonna watch it, and I don't know if it's gonna be Tiger King cool unless Crushfield's got a piercing I'm not aware of. I think it's gonna be pretty vanilla, to be honest with you. But high hopes, guys, high hopes. Well, how about this? And by the way, I feel a little bad when I say this audio was bad. I was trying to read your guys' little ass lips this entire time. This audio was so bad. Like, this was pathetic. And I apologize, because it definitely affected the conversation. But
hey, that leaves the door open for us to do it again.
Very true.
yeah, we're going to do a second one of these, because I always like doing follow-up episodes. But like I said, I wanted to kind of get some more Blood Python content flowing this year. MJ made me. Yeah, I always enjoy talking about him, and just try not to come off like an idiot. It's weird because there's certain things I always remember, and me mixing up even the cherry bomb thing. I think it's like the fourth time I mixed that up and been corrected on it, but my brain's just not working right. But no, you know, like I said, I'm looking forward to both your guys' seasons. You know, Ernesto, you never really even advertised for yourself on this. You didn't really talk about your business page or anything like that. You know, you should probably give yourself a shout out. You know, I went ahead and started following you the other day, but we got to get some people on that page, man, because I expect you to put out some content this year.
Sure will. I'm going to follow your advice. I think that's a good idea, and I think that's something for this coming year. Like, I just made that New Year's resolution on the spot.
And what's the name of that? What's the name of your Facebook page for that?
It's going to be the Scarlet Society, and all my platforms are the same thing. ScarletSociety.com, that's the website, and then Instagram and Facebook. I don't do TikTok or anything like that.
Okay, respect. And you know, I don't really fuck around with websites anymore because nobody's doing anything, and
Right.
you know, who goes on Roll the Ball Pythons anymore? So I'm gonna make yours one of those things I did back in the day where I keep an eye on things.
Yeah, go look at
Make
it.
sure you're doing things that get my attention.
You know, if you want to have
it's
like a visual reference, go for it. If you have any questions like, oh, how did this morph look like, or whatever, if I have it on the website, it's got a good gallery, so you can send or refer people. And it's like just look at that snake over there.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
his
works for me.
website is awesome, and I was excited. Y'all wanted to get Ernesto on because, in my opinion, he's been way too humble, and hopefully he crawls out of his humble shell a little bit because he's doing some really cool stuff. So it's going to be fun to watch what he's doing. And yeah, everybody definitely go check him out and follow all his stuff and go look at the website because I remember when he launched it. It's a pretty awesome website.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Honestly, Tim brought you up a lot before we did this. So, you know, as soon as I had you in mind, I figured the three of us would do something good. But, you know, we're going to do a follow-up on this one for sure, because I think there's a lot more to be said that we'll cover. We're going to come up with a couple really good topics for us next time. But honestly, I appreciate both you guys making time for this tonight, especially, you know, Ernesto. If I ever get down to Austin, you know, I know it's a beautiful city. I've been just south of there. If you would have me by, would love to see some shit.
Of course, I'll be more than happy to host you.
All right, awesome. Appreciate it. Well, guys, again, appreciate you guys making time for this. Tim, Ernesto, hope you guys have a nice evening.
Likewise, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Tim.
Yes, sir.
Okay, guys. Same as always. MJ will probably be in the background shutting this down, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. I have no idea what I'm doing in 2 weeks. I think me and Junior have something good going on this Friday, though. So tune in next Friday. I think we got an OG on there. Everyone's going to appreciate hearing from. So tune in. Appreciate you.
Sure will, man.
Later, guys.
Bye, Tim.
See ya.
Later, buddy. I'll message you.
Yeah.
All right, man. We need to get on the phone and talk about this wrought iron stuff.
Yeah. No,
yeah, those eggs are cooking, and I'm excited, man. I'm excited.
Well, hey, yeah, they brought it up. I didn't say anything, but the pied female to wrought iron bred should be ovulating in the next 5 days.
Yeah, there we go. I want to talk about that on the show, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep it quiet because I know it's like super personal.
I literally went and looked the other day. I was like, man, let me throw the I quit ultrasounding bloods a long time ago because they're always nasty and it's a mess and it's hard to see anything. But when I think something's going, like if their follicles are big, I can see them. And so sure enough, she's got gigantic follicles. So we'll see, which is a bummer. That's one of my younger girls. My original oldest girl still isn't doing anything. But
oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I ultrasounded her. I didn't see much in her, but the other girl, I got 3. The other one's got pretty sizable follicles, and that one's been breeding the mixel. So I think we'll get something out of that one. But the original girl I've had on my pied male now, so that's pied to pied. So I really would like her to go as well.
Yeah.
We'll
that's so cool. I didn't
realize that the wrought iron, the supers, I didn't realize that girl had already ovulated though.
Yeah. That it was kind of like a last minute thing because we were gonna wait for next year, and then Tracy's like, you know what, we're in a roll. Let's go, man. I'm gonna send you that female. Sweet. And yeah, I mean, I got her back in March and Pepper fed her, and she was with the male maybe 3 times, and now she's on the pre-ovulatory shed. It's crazy.
I'm gonna tell you what. I hope you got some in there. You're gonna shit when you see them because they're phenomenal animals. I mean, they're so crazy looking. You know, I want to see what they're gonna develop into too. So hopefully we get something that lives out of that.
Right. That's the main thing, was just to collect that information and messed up. There's data there, you know, regardless of the outcome. The importance is to obtain that information so we can put it out there and be like, hey.
Oh, no, for sure. You know, the whole freaking temperature thing is hilarious, and I can't believe I didn't even think about that. You know, because there's another species of snake right now with eye issues. That's palmetto corn snakes. Have bug eyes in them.
Yeah, and it's also temperature related, right? If you incubate them lower, you get rid of the boggy eyes.
So freaking, I had a friend was telling me about that last year and some theories. And so last year I only bred 1 clutch of them instead of breeding a whole bunch because they're a pain in the butt to sell. And so sure enough, last year I incubated them cooler. Every palmetto I hatched last year, perfect eyes.
There you go.
So eye issues have always been related to temperature, and I can't believe I didn't think about that on the blood python piece or on the palmetto piece. You know, because it's been an issue in the past on numerous other things. But you know, so it's one of those. Hey, you just forget about it for a little while. But here it is back in the forefront now. So every time I have some species or something else that's got an issue, it's like, hey, dude, you got an issue? Cool it down a little bit.
Cool it down. That's it. That's
See what happens. So it should have been simple, basic knowledge for me to think of on the rod arm piece, and I didn't. But hey, at least it works. We figured hopefully we figured it out. Hopefully we'll replicate it again this year. I mean, and I'm breeding one, two, three, four. So four. I have 4 potential clutches for wrought iron stuff this year.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's 2 different males breeding and the original female breeding. So 4 potential clutches. So we'll see. I mean, could be a fair bit of stuff, which would be nice that it's a larger sampling size until you incubate the same. And so if we do all that, and specifically the albino wrought iron batik, if I get that one to go, then we get, you know, a bunch of perfect eyed animals out of that. That's really, then we can, in my opinion, at that point, we can definitively say it's all incubatorial.
Right. Because if you look at the ratio, it doesn't make sense, right? It's not like you have same amount of eyes with scale issues and the clutches. It's so strange. I don't know. Hopefully, once we get
I know, you know, my big question is, I want to ask Tracy, the first clutch she hatched with those scale issues, what did she do different? Because I know she incubates cooler and always has, so I suspect all the stuff was hatching perfect at first, and then she did something weird with that clutch.
She did tell me she put the egg boxes in a different spot than the usual spot for blood python. So she did mention, like, I did move them. They were a little higher, so it's a little hotter. So there's a temperature related issue. And that's why when we were talking about temperature, she's like, you know what, that makes sense. Let's give it a try. And now we're at now. But yeah, ask her. She's gonna tell you the story. She mentioned that she moved those boxes to a different location.
No, that makes sense now, because she was, you know, it wasn't until I was incubating slightly warmer than her, and I don't necessarily know that I was incubating that much warmer. I did this year put my blood clutches, the wrought iron clutches, on the ground in the incubator.
Okay.
I've got a walk-in incubator, so my incubator is what's that? Probably about 4 foot by 4 foot by 15 foot, 8 foot tall.
Yep.
And so when you walk in, I guess my first shelf is probably like about 40 inches off the ground, 3.5 feet. And then I've got another shelf like 2 foot above, another one 2 foot above. But I put the wrought iron clutches here on the floor because I knew it would be cooler on the floor, and then put fewer eggs per box, because I historically have used slightly smaller boxes.
Okay.
And I've got big blood females, so I would get big clutches, so like 12 or 13 eggs, and I'd put them in one of my bigger tubs. You know, I'd put them in I've got these square tubs I used to put my big blood clutches in, and those square tubs they're probably 16 by 16 maybe.
Yeah, like a 15 quarter.
Yeah, 16 by 16, and I'd put, you know, 13, 14, 15 eggs in that thing.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, that's where I killed that. And Tracy's like, hey, just put 4. And I use something smaller than that, but I'll put 4 eggs in there and that's it.
Right.
So, and then put them on the floor. So I wasn't incubating that much warmer than her, but I mean, and that's the only thing that still, I told Tracy the first time we heard that. And then after I had some success with it, and after she told me what you did, I said, well, Tracy, the only thing that still scares me now is that's a very minor adjustment. You know, so it's like, man, that really scares me that you're
walking
1.5 degrees away from a problem. It's like, shit, I hate that, you know? I mean, and the problem is I'm so multi-species and I incubate so much stuff in my incubator. I can't really afford to go down too much more. I might drop my whole incubator 1 more degree this year, though.
Do you have like high sensitivity species like desert animals where if you drop them too much, then the clutch will go bad?
No, the only thing that does weird stuff in my incubator is antaresia. I got maculosis. So I've got spotted pythons.
Yep.
And my spotteds, they hatched pretty early. And this year, I think I should have put them. I needed to make an adjustment. I had a whole clutch of 13 eggs go bad this year, which is weird. But they'll always hatch at like 40 days. You know, so those guys, Not sure what I need to do with them, but I still think I don't access the top shelf of my incubator. It's been a long time since I have. Like when I was producing 100 ball python clutches a year, I needed that shelf.
Yeah.
Now I almost never need more. Most of the time, I don't fill up my bottom shelf, and sometimes I'll go to my middle one.
Mhm.
But I think I can drop the temperature in my incubator a degree and still use that top shelf for warmer stuff. And then still have a whole extra degree lower on the floor. So I may drop it a whole degree this year, and see what happens.
Okay. So do you produce enough like to justify getting a smaller incubator just for the Antaresia? And then you can
No,
grow the
no,
whole
only
thing?
only have two females in Antaresia. I don't produce a bunch of that stuff. I mean, I probably could get a hoverbait or something for that, but
Mhm.
I mean, they normal at the other clutch. I had two clutches, a 13 egg and a 14 egg this year, and the 14 egg did fine. The 13 egg didn't. So, but they were both from parent mothers that have had clutches before. So I don't know. It was weird. Who knows what happened there? But but no, I mean, I've put I've put I put Angolan eggs in there. I put freaking Antaresia eggs in there. I put blood eggs in there. Ball python eggs in there. What else have I put in there? The Gilas don't go in there. Colubrids don't go in there. I know there's something else I put in there. I don't remember what, but
You guys made me look like an asshole, and the boss called me, wondering why you guys are still talking, and I'm not here. But we can keep going for a little longer because this is actually fascinating.
are we live still?
Yeah, this whole time you guys are still live. I had fans hitting me up, asking why I left. No, we're good, man. You see that thing up there saying live with a little TikTok on there? Like,
Yeah, but I didn't know.
yeah, you guys are doing great.
I thought we were talking in the green room.
Yeah, no, that green room is recording, but we're gonna keep going. Here's a question. I actually,
guess there's some people know that wrought iron pies are coming pretty soon. Man.
That's right.
yeah, you told everybody.
I mean, hey, I was gonna post some pictures soon anyway, so that wasn't a big secret. Everyone, I posted a picture of them breeding, so it wasn't a secret. The only secret was no one knew that she was ovulating shortly.
Oh, congratulations, buddy. But no, yeah, you didn't hit the little X to leave the room like I did. We all gave our pieces and our waves, but that's cool. This is good. Hey, I got an incubation question for you though, because I heard you talking incubation when I went in the kitchen.
Mhm.
When this happened to me in another conversation where we talked about how blood pythons are kept at a lower setting, lower hotspot. So immediately my question was, I would have thought incubating your eggs would be a lot lower too, not a consistent 88. What's the lowest temperature you've ever tried incubating blood python eggs at?
So I'll tell you, my incubator's set at 87 and a half. And if you just heard me saying I'm going to drop mine a degree, I had my blood eggs on the floor last year. And every time I would shoot a temp on them, they'd be about 86. I'm not so sure that I wouldn't mind trying them at 85. So I'll let Ernesto speak to his piece. But I mean, I definitely think sub 87 degrees. Now, all my other blood stuff I've always kept right in the middle of that incubator. So they've probably incubated at 87 to 88 and I didn't have a problem. But what the other part you potentially missed is me talking about palmettos with the bug eyes, and I incubated them cooler this year and got rid of the problem. So to me, I think if you have a gene that is problematic, you probably want to incubate cooler. But I think you can probably, as a general rule, you can probably incubate most bloods at 87 to 88. But I don't think it definitely does not hurt to incubate them at 86. And I'll let Ernesto talk. He may have even gone a little bit cooler than that. But
just a little bit.
I think the general rule has always been any species. If you incubate a little bit cooler, it takes a little bit longer for them to hatch, but you generally end up with animals that hatch absorbing more yolk and coming out of the egg stronger. So, hey, it's dialing it in, and like I told Tracy, what really bummed me out when I started having problems. That Tracy, I've been producing blood pythons for 8-10 years. And now all of a sudden I got a problem. It made me guess my confidence in my ability to produce a species I've been producing for a decade. So sometimes they'll reel you back into humbleness every now and again. But I think cooler is probably a little better on them. But I think in outside of the wrought iron stuff, everything else, you can probably get away with about 87 or 88 degrees because I've been probably doing 87 and a half for years with them.
Yeah, with my incubator, I start at 86, 86.5. and then I monitor the temperature as we're getting close to the hatching day, because babies start moving and they start producing their own heat as well. So if I need to drop the temp a little more, I do it, but consistently inside of the egg boxes. I have a thermometer, and it's constantly dialing between 87 and 86. So my sweet spot is 86.5, and it stays consistent throughout the entire incubation process. Now, we were talking about this because Tim has like a walk-in incubator, and it's a huge space. Mine is one of those Sea Serpents 36. So for me, controlling these microclimates, it's a lot easier because I'm only incubating 3 clutches per year. So my numbers are nothing compared to Tim's or other people with larger collections. So dialing this, it's a little easier. So yeah, if you ask me, my sweet spot is 86 to 87 with a gradient of 86.5.
Okay. So Tim, on your palmetto comment, so this year I produced quite a few palmettos, and literally sphagnum moss, 6-inch deli cup, threw them up on a shelf in my baby ball python room. I think that room had some days it was probably as low as 74. If the cat opened the door, it got as hot as 78, maybe 81 on some summer or spring days. I ran into only one male palmetto with an eye issue this year.
Yeah, I incubated mine on the floor underneath one of my blood python racks in probably one of the cooler areas of my room, trying to get them to 77, 78. But like you, my room will spike to 85 sometimes in the summer, but I'm measuring that higher up, not on the concrete floor where those things were. So I bet I didn't shoot temps, but I only produced 1 clutch of palmettos this year. I only bred for 1 clutch of palmettos this year, and said, let me try it. And if that works, then I'll produce a whole bunch more next year. Sure enough, I had 4 palmettos in that 1 clutch, and every one of them had perfect eyes. And it was like 3.1 or 2.2. So it was, there were males in there with good eyes. So I'm all for trying to get my palmetto clutches in the 77-degree range if I can. I don't have a really good spot that's consistent for that, but hearing you say maybe 74, if I go into my colubered room, that room is set at 75 and may spike to 76 in the summer. So I might try to incubate a clutch of them in there on a shelf, high in that room this year, just to see how they'll do it 75 or 76. Because I've got my Spangler eye are in there, my diamond pythons are in there, and then all of my other colubrids are in that colubered room that I normally try to keep at ambient temperature, like 75 degrees, 74, 75 in there.
Yeah, I think the space heater that I have in that room, because it's just a room in the house, I like, like Brian, I like having the incubators in the house. I like having the babies in the house. So that room typically is set at a 78. I had them at about face level on a bookshelf, and in all honesty, like I said, it should have been at an average of 78, but my house is set at 72. If that door's open and that mixture air, like I said, it would be at 74 for a few days. Like I said, it was a very, very inconsistent. I got an extra incubator. I might try to put them at like 74 to 76 consistently the whole way through and see what happens. But I mean, even the hets that I use are all related animals, so they're closely enough related where I don't know. I figured I'd have more issues with having related animals. But when it comes to blood pythons, though, do you guys have a substrate of choice when you're incubating, or are you guys all over the board with this stuff?
All over the board.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Ernesto probably does what Tracy does, and I don't do that.
Yeah, we do it differently. I do perlite with an inch of water at the bottom just to preserve humidity, pretty much between 99 and 100% in the egg boxes. But the eggs are not sitting on the perlite. We have those like plastic meshes, so they're suspended.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a 5-gallon bucket with a piece of glass on top?
That is actually, I have one of those. I'll show it to you.
I'm not sure if Tracy's still doing it that way. Were her old incubators like 5-gallon buckets and glass on top?
Yeah.
She had some old incubators that she used to use 35-gallon trash cans and would put everything in there. Me, I do everything old school. Everything is on 50-50 perlite from vermiculite mix the fucking water straight into it, and fucking drop the eggs right in there. I incubate colubrids, tortoises, bloods, balls. I don't fucking everything goes in that same old mix. I don't care.
Yeah, so
Heelers, it all goes in there.
and this is the mesh, the one that people use for crafts.
Where do you pick that up?
This is Walmart actually. It works
Okay,
great.
everything's at Walmart.
Yeah, right. I like it because the space, the little space in between the mesh are actually small, so when the babies hatch, they don't go on the perlite. So it's
True.
very clean. Because I used to have the big light covers, the big white mesh looking thing, but it's plastic. I can't remember.
Yeah, stuff you get at Home Depot that you put.
Yeah, exactly those ones.
LED,
Yeah, and then I switched to
light
these
bulb.
ones and it works perfect.
I forgot what they call that crap now. It was just had it in my head, but
You could incubate directly in a perlite vermiculite mixture, like eggs in contact, or do you guys run into a lot of molding issues?
well, that's what I do. So I've been doing that for blood since 2010 or 11 in that. So it seems to work fine for me for 13.
I know it's ball pythons and they're bulletproof, but like 5 years ago, my greenhouse didn't order my vermiculite or perlite. So I just took all my REPTIchip and threw it in there and just put them all in the incubator. Everything hatched. Next year, I took cypress, threw cypress mulch in there, threw the eggs in there. Everything hatched. But that's ball python eggs. It's hard to fuck up a ball python egg.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't think a blood python egg is that drastically different than a ball python egg. To be honest with you, I mean, I think they may be slightly more temperature sensitive, or not even temperature sensitive. Just would prefer something slightly cooler. Just like the adults obviously live slightly cooler. They're laying eggs where they live, so a few degrees cooler than ball python, you're probably fine. But I mean, I use the Corey Woods method. I don't know how many people know that, but Corey Woods has got vermiculite and perlite from like 22 years ago that's hatched 50 clutches of eggs on the exact same blend. I've got boxes I mixed up probably in the early 2000s that I've never emptied, so I'm throwing blood eggs on some of that stuff, so I don't ditch that stuff very often. So my perlite's not even white anymore. Some of those it's like tan colored because the freaking vermiculite stained the perlite.
Yeah, but blood python eggs are pretty resilient in general. I mean, you can do a lot of different things. And they hatch.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I think, even like with corn snakes eggs, like I said, the same thing. I've done cypress mulch. I've done vermiculite perlite, I think a couple times, sphagnum moss a couple times. I did the REPTIchip one year just because anything that holds a little bit of moisture and doesn't mold is going to do just fine.
Right.
I mean, I think back in the day, didn't people used to get newspaper wet and crumple up in little balls and put it underneath something? Or I think that's the way they used to do it. At least some guys did.
Maybe.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I just wasn't aware of it. I've never done that. I mix my stuff up and then I pour a whole bunch of water in the corner and let it go underneath all the vermiculite perlite. And then, I'm saran wrapping everything. And then, we get to that issue, airflow. I don't have any holes in my tub and I don't freaking take the saran wrap off to look at eggs. So I have plenty of clutches of eggs that go completely sealed for 60 days and hatch with no problem. So
you're not removing the moisture from the top. If it drips on the egg, no stress.
Nope. I mean, maybe the egg stresses. I don't stress.
Clearly not, unless it's affecting their eyes.
Yeah, I do remove the excess moisture, but just towards the end of the incubation. For the most part, I just leave them alone.
Yeah, I used to put a bigger effort into it. I had a little squeegee. I'd open the lid, squeegee it off, set them up, check them almost every day, and then I didn't do it one year, and everything hatched, and I stopped forever.
Yeah.
Well, you guys want to keep on telling secrets while we're recording live, or you guys want to call it this time?
No, Ernesto already said he got to call me, so we can talk about secrets offline.
That's right. Because I have a big question, but yeah, this cannot be recorded.
Yeah, you guys go ahead. Just if it says live and it's red like that, that's caution, buddy. Don't say shit you're not supposed to.
Well, like I said, I don't think anything we weren't supposed to. Matter of fact, I was prepared to mention the pied wrought iron clutch on live, but we just kind of never got to a good point to squeeze it in there without sounding like a freaking advertisement, So I didn't say anything. But not a big
Well, that's
secret.
an exciting one, man. We're all happy for that.
If all is
Hey,
well, in
well-
about 40 days, I'm gonna post a picture of that girl sitting on eggs. So I mean, it's all good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sweet. Tight. Well, I'm gonna make sure to have MJ clip that 2-minute section of you talking about your secrets, and we'll post that to advertise for this video. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
all
That's
right,
probably the
well-
best part of the whole thing.
Yeah,
Right.
it really was. As
That's
soon as I
highlight of
left
the
the podcast suddenly got good. But all right, well, real goodbyes this time, guys. I
Oh.
appreciate you again.
Absolutely, man.
Take care.
Be good,
Hit
everybody.
the little X at the bottom, guys. Don't
Yeah,
be hanging out in here by
I'm
yourself.
looking for it. You see, it's my first time doing this.
I don't want MJ yelling at you again.
Yeah, please don't. Please don't. Later, buddies.
Bye.